Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 1. Now let's start the fanfic. Her wrists had been burning for days, chaffed and raw from the metal shackles around her wrists. Sakura stared out across the desert lands she had to follow the other slaves through, watching it go on and on and on without end. She would have to trek it all in order to get to the shore where boats were waiting to take them to market. It had taken them days to get through the hungry lands, where nothing grew. It tore at Sakura's patience more than anything else, to wait in her shackles and see nothing for miles around. To sleep and see sand and wake again only to do it all over again the next night made her mad. She was not meant for endless filler. She had a job to do. She was here in the dream world to find the obelisk and move on to the next level. That was the whole reason she gave up on her assured happiness. Don't drag. One of the slavers barked, striking out at someone at the back of the line. Sakura looked back over her shoulder and saw someone smaller than her, younger too, struggling to keep up with the others. The girl was panting and her face was red, if not devoid of details. She wasn't an actor, she wasn't important, but she was suffering. What will you do? The spirits in the wind seemed to tither for her ears. Sakura didn't know how sane she was anymore, or how wondrous the dream was since entering the last gate. So far, every night for a solid week had been the same. The first day back into the dream she was lost in distortion and chaos as raiders ripped her from a tent in the middle of a grassy plain and folded her into a box with several other bodies. After that terrible night caught in claustrophobia, she was yanked out and slammed into a pair of shackles and forced to match behind a band of other slaves. Sakura tensed in her shackles and rattled them again. She could feel the energy that gave her power in the dream world. In the kingdom of beasts they called it chakra, but inside the shackles she was muted. The shackles kept her power at bay, blocking it and ing away what was caught in overflow. She didn't know what was worse, not having powers or having powers that were worth nothing. The line that connected one slave to another rattled and went taut, forcing the bodies before and after Sakura to still and turn to look at the back of the line. The girl from before was gasping, lips slit and bleeding, eyes crying without tears from dehydration. She had fallen, halting the trek for all those still in chains linked to hers, and it didn't look like she would be getting up again soon. One of the slavers, a man dressed head to toe in sand-colored robes, prodded her body with his foot and then drew his sword. It was long and curved and came down angry. Sakura, though it was meant for the chains, to separate her from the rest of them, but there was a wet splatter of red around his ankles as he lifted again and finished severing her hands from her arms. She convulsed and Sakura could only imagine the pain before a second slaver came over with a knife and struck it through her neck, cursing out the first slaver for his cruelty. The broken men and women around Sakura shivered at the sight, and she knew why he had cut the girl's hands instead of the chain. Fear. There were 5 male slavers and 2 female, but between the 7 masked figures there were over 30 slaves in chains, not including the dead girl. The slaver with blood all over his legs turned and wiped his sword while watching the slaves in line, scanning their face for fear. He stared extra long at Sakura when she didn't flinch or drop her eyes. Maybe that wasn't a wise thing of her to do while still in chains, but he didn't make anything of it. Instead, he replaced his sword in its sheath and moved to the front of the line. It was another 2 nights of fear-laced trekking through the dry lands before they laid down and came under a dune of sand and rock. Sakura slept on the edge, but between the faceless people she had walked ahead and behind for nearly 8 dreams. Before she fell awake, she breathed deep and smelled something different in the air. Salt. Do you want a coffee before going back? Ino asks, tying up the front of her robe as she walks out into the living room where Sakura spent the night again. I have tea too. You like tea, I remember. It's morning. The dream world of sand and slaves and chains is gone, at least it is for a few more hours. Going without sleep doesn't work forever, and before she's ready, Sakura will have to dream of that world again. That's what living with a curse is like. Sakura ties up the laces on her boots and grunts something, because shaking her head hurts too much. It was unfair how the same night out could make her feel like the hunchback of Notre Dame with a semi-trailer stuck in her forehead while Ino looked like she just stepped off the page of a lingerie spread for Paris Fashion Week. It was an apt comparison. Sakura's seen the glossy prints Ino has of herself hanging and framed in her bedroom. I need to get going. I have work. You said your boss lost a client and that you don't have as much work anymore, I thought. Sakura groaned. No, the opposite. It's nearly tax season and everyone is crazy and there are so many last-minute bastards that want 6 months worth of work done in 2 weeks. I shouldn't have gone out last night. You needed it. Gosh, Sakura, you look like you still need some time off. It's killing you to wake up in the morning. Ino sinks down into the seat alongside Sakura and stretches over, hugging her friend's shoulder. I can't take time off, Sakura whispered, hating how loud Ino's voice became when it was right next to her ear. I need to get going. I'll get something on the way. Sakura tried to shake Ino off, but instead of falling away, the blonde rose with Sakura, still hugging her shoulders, and followed Sakura all the way to the door. The closer she got, the more weight Ino put into her hold on Sakura, trying to drag the pale girl back. You were coughing in your sleep last night and super restless. Are you sure you're okay? Ino, you need to stop being such a creep to other people when they sleep. Sakura bit out before a yawn forced her jaw open again and interrupted her words. The blonde pouted. That was one time and the guy gets weird about it, turning it into a joke. I just like watching people sleep, it's not hurting anyone. Let me live. Let me go. No, the blonde mewed, tugging her friend back even harder. Karen is going to keep you locked up again and I won't see you for days. I'm shooting for a magazine in California next week, I'll be gone for the whole weekend. You have a phone. It's not the same. I could never do long distance with a relationship, even friends, I have to be there next to them, touching their hands and making sure they're real. Otherwise, what's the use? Ino, Sakura sighed, feeling her headache kick. In another world where I'm not so damn tired, I'd tell you to a rock and get over it, because you're not 4 anymore, but right now I really can't fight you on a verbal front, so please just let me go. The sooner I get done, the sooner I can rest again. Please. The blonde let Sakura go, but pouted loudly. I'll help you find something else if you need the money. You don't even like your job. Her head was throbbing and she hated the pressure building up behind her eyes. Sakura wanted to snarl all of a sudden. Most people don't love their jobs, Ino. That's why it is called a job, and not a hobby. Some of us weren't as fortunate as others and had to settle with what was available. The reason Ino was where she was now was also the reason why Sakura was struggling to pay bills without any hope of going back to school in the near future. Maybe it was a bit harsh, but Sakura was too tired and tense to be careful with her words. She had been understanding so far, but if this was the only time she sounded sour about her lot in life in comparison to Ino's, then that wasn't so bad. Ino would be fine. Sakura took the stairs 2 at a time to get to the carport. There was no one else in the hallways, but she always felt watched, but that was how she always felt when she became agitated, it seemed. Climbing into her station wagon, Sakura turned on the radio and grimaced when she heard the swing jazz flow easily through her speakers. It made parts of her body vibrate with a pleasant memory. She killed the station and turned it to NPR, never looking behind her to see if Ino was on the balcony watching her drive away. She didn't believe looking back would do her any good. Sakura awoke in the dream world to shouting, and then she was yanked into running with the group of slaves like they had never run before. There were screams and smoke from far behind them, angry shouting too. Things were happening at last. She didn't understand the words spoken, there was too much yelling to hear anything clearly, but she understood the urgency. Only 3 of the slavers were left, the other were absent. Sakura noticed the one who had killed the girl out of mercy was standing closest to her. The one who had chopped the girl's hands off was absent. In the early morning things were still dark out, but more than the dim there was dust and sand in the air, making it hard to see clearly. Everything was a mess in front of her eyes, but she ran where she was pulled, and didn't think twice of it. As long as she was still in chains, there was nothing she could do. An arrow killed the slave 2 bodies ahead of her. Everyone connected to him on the chain snagged as his body became a dead weight to drag through the sand. Another slave was struck in his leg. The wailing from behind her told Sakura there were others who were dying as well. The slavers were cursing, and the mercy killer ran forward to unlock the master link that kept the chain threaded through their shackles. A moment later she heard the click and the slaves on the ends were pulling out, trying to run free. All around them were modest outcroppings of rocks and rises in the earth, but the easiest path away was one with no cover. Sakura saw a handful run down that way and fall onto their faces with arrows sticking out of their necks. Sakura was free of the chain, but she still had the shackles on that kept her chakra restrained. Once the chain fell through the loop of her shackles, she ran for the largest outcropping of rocks and rolled into the sand, covering herself with dirt and keeping her body as out of sight as possible. She wasn't going to die here after coming so far. She had a curse to beat. First, she had to see who her enemy was. They had arrows, which meant they had the advantage of long-range weapons and the cover of a dusty dusk. She couldn't see much more than shadows way off. She squinted and wanted to spit out the sand she tasted between her teeth. They were tall shadows, large ones too, likely mounted. She was shackled and didn't have a weapon, they weren't worth a frontal assault. She could be smart about this and still win, she had to be. She didn't know the terrain of her surrounds very well, but she knew how to be adaptive. If there were rock outcrops, there might be something better for cover than what she had first settled on. Sakura crawled on her stomach towards the places where the grass and sand were thinnest. She found more rock under her hands and then a ledge. She turned herself around and lowered herself down, finding plenty of long, thin footholds. She kept climbing down, even after she felt a shelf of sand and grass pass her by. There was a gash in the earth where she could lower herself and hide while still maintaining a decent view of the trail snaking down in front of her rock. Sakura knew how to wait, and that paid off when the cruel slaver, the one who had cut the girl's hands, passed by in front of her with a mounted Roman's warrior with tanned, leathery skin to his left. Another 2 horses with mounted riders drew up, but across the rump of their steeds lay an unconscious slave each. Their commander looked unhappy, but maybe he was always that stern. It was not an impressive lot this time. I was most disappointed. You asked we keep their shackles on. This would have been very different if they were allowed to use their gift. The Colosseum does not believe in, nor does it allow magic for its fighters. If they are worth anything to us in the ring, they can show it to us now. You were mounted and armed. What do you expect of the dehydrated, starved whelps? The cruel slaver asked with a tone that might have been dismissive, but not disrespectful. He was talking to someone important. I expected another 10 girl or boy. The season is dry for my legion and the other units already have impressive fighters. I am dissatisfied. The day is not yet up, my friend. There still are slaves to be found. Hiding is not fighting. I have no need of a coward. I still anticipate your pleasure. Come, we will continue this way. The slaver and the commander turned, and Sakura inwardly cursed when she caught sight of the commander's face. Though it was turned away, it was clear and vivid, the way only actors looked inside the dream world. He was a part of the dream she would have to become closer to. She pressed herself to the rock and waited for them to move out of sight, mulling over their words. They were hunting the slaves as a test, they wanted fighters for a Colosseum. He looked like he was dressed in Imperial Roman gold and red, so she didn't doubt the idea that her dream was burrowing from what she knew of the ancient civilization. A Colosseum meant gladiators, and gladiators meant fights. It wasn't a stretch to imagine the plot of her new dream. Here, tracks. Sakura's breath caught when she heard a newer voice, one from above. There wasn't much room to move, but there was dust and bits of rock falling on her head. She tried to see up, but it was still dim. A foot came into focus, sandals, and then bare leg. Someone was scaling the wall down to her, and soon she would be able to see his face, meaning he would be able to see her. Before he could go much further, Sakura leapt up and clawed at his leg, dragging him down. It wasn't a far fall, but he landed on his back and struck his head. Sakura didn't stop to check if that did the trick, she already had a rock and was lifting it to smash against his temple. He didn't have a face, it didn't matter that she killed the man, he was just a part of the dream, he wasn't real. Oi, there was another voice. Did you fall? Sakura was out in the open now, still covered by the shadow of the rock face, but she was still in shackles that gave her limited movement. The dead soldier had a knife on him, maybe something else, but the knife was long and sharp enough for her to work with. When she heard the hurried footsteps, she pressed herself up against the rocks where shadows would keep her shaded until a new body moved into view. She didn't hear the words he said, but took the steps to his neck before she had time to think about what she was doing. Sideways into the neck, and then out. Her legs were painted red as she stood over the two bodies. She had killed before. This wasn't new. She was no stranger to blood, but that had been too easy. Sakura checked her breathing and realized she wasn't weary. Like the kingdom of beasts, this dream didn't put on her the limitations of the waking world. That was likely one of her greatest advantages, to never slow down or tire in a fight. If she had the shackles off, she could see what else she could still do. Sakura looked down at the bloody knife and tried to fit its point into the lock hole. She understood the basics of lock picking, mostly because she loved puzzles and locks were just a different type of puzzle. But this wasn't so much a puzzle as it was an impossible task. The links between one wrist to the other were 5 long, enough for her to move around semi-freely, but the lock hole was under her wrist, and it was nearly impossible to reach it with her dominant hand. Her legs were cold where the blood still lingered. Sunlight was coming and the sands were starting to glow with the first hints of light. Soon disability would be better and her defense would be lacking. What did that mean for her? Her gun told her to go after the Romans, one of them was an actor. But she had just killed 2 of his men and she was still a slave in his eyes. What would he do to her once they met? What will you do now? Sakura whirled to face the new voice. He was dressed like one of the slavers, but one vertical half his face was covered by cloth connecting to a turban. Sakura saw he had 2 distinctive, red markings on the right side of his face, the only visible part of his head. They reminded her of Kiba, almost. But just as she studied him, he studied her. He wasn't really a slaver. You're not an actor, are you? The guide, he asked in a rough hum that echoed all throughout his body. When Sakura didn't move, he went on to nod. I'm not like Hayate, a manipulated ghost, nor am I like Kimamaru, a subservient desperate for love. And Sai, nor am I like the Sai of dejection, wherever he may be. He shook his head and the cloth barely moved. She doubted she would ever see under it. No, I am your guide, but now one you can anticipate. So you just have a brand new angle, right? What is it for you? Sai wanted to help me, Kimamaru wanted to kill me, Hayate wanted a good story but was caught on a leash for Madara. How will you be different? Once upon a time guides were supposed to be neutral forces, offering support to aid the dreamer, but never directly interfering with the dream. Maybe that is who I am, maybe now. Regarding my counsel and what I say, you will have to make a choice on what to trust, if anything. And what do you say? Seek out the Legionnaire. He is an Uchiha, one of the few you will ever meet this deep into the curse. His name is Indra and he is looking for a slave like you to fight for him in the Colosseum. I won't tell you if that's the only way to finding this gate's obelisk, but you can be guaranteed that things will happen if you meet with him now. That's terribly helpful, Sakura snorted, sarcasm thick. How do I know he's safe? Baki took another step back, starting to turn away. You don't, but you are the dreamer. He took another step and there was sand all around him. His body broke down and seeped into the wind, just another handful of desert grains. A moment later and Sakura was alone with 2 dead bodies and a useless knife stuck in her shackles keyhole. At least she knew about her guide in this gate. Over a week of mindless filler dreaming, and it seemed like things were finally starting to move. She had an idea of what she needed to do, and where she needed to go. Sakura picked the knife out of her shackles and started to sprint back up the hill, heading in the direction both men had come from. If they had come from that place, then maybe their horses were still there. Horses had saddlebags with things that might be used as keys, right? It would look better to not have her restraints when she meets the new actor. Indra Uchiha. Just when she thought she had met the last of them, there was one still hiding out. This was the last gate, and after she passed through she would be in the last kingdom. How many people had died if every actor she had ever met was someone who had died with the curse? She knew it was a lot, but there were too many faces and names to put on that long list of numbers. Poor Haku and Zabuza and Kisame. Poor Kiba and Shizune and Tsunade. Poor Neji and Lee and Tenten. Poor Uchihas, each one more miserable in memory than the last. Sakura came to the crest of the ridge and saw a pair of horses, left behind with their simple saddles and pretty red ornaments. The gold details that were on Indra's horse were missing, but that was likely because the ones she killed were not as important. Indra was their leader. The chafing of her wrists reminds Sakura what she is after, and she searches through the bag behind the horse's saddles, looking for something she can use. The first horse complied easily enough, but when she goes for the second, it rears and cries out on a loud pitch before settling down enough for Sakura to get into the saddlebag. Nothing. It would be so much easier if she could just think up a key to fit into her lock, but the shackles keep her from using any of her abilities. It had been such a long time since she last dreamed up something out of nothing. What are you doing? Sakura turned and spun away just in time to avoid an arrow to the foot. The horses had wandered only a hair's breadth away, but when they heard the arrow they reared and ran, taking their cover with them. Sakura was out in the open with only her knife and the blood on her legs. She couldn't even see who was shooting at her. Time seemed to slow down as she spun and took in the new details of the land behind her shoulders. A shadow, not mounted, sand in the air, no cover. The thoughts flashed across her mind like they were cars on a subway line and she was standing still on the platform. The distance between her and the guard wasn't something she could cover before he fired another arrow, and he was already notching another as she turned. Her arm snapped into motion and she remembered what it felt like to throw a knife with all the muscles of her body. It should have hit his neck. She had excellent aim, but the shackles on her wrist threw her off and the blade landed in his shoulder. He screamed in pain but remained standing. She saw him move for another weapon and she knew she would have to go in close if she hoped to leave with her life. Sakura was running for him and used the chains between her wrists to her advantage, even when they had been the reasons she had to fight up close. He had a dagger out, much like the one she had just thrown, and he took a swipe at her before she could raise her hands. It tore a shallow stream through her abdomen, but the blood was thin. It was nothing she would have to worry about. He brought his knife up again and she forced the rest of her body to be faster as she raised her hands and brought them down around his neck. Sakura slid in the dust and sand to stand behind him and pulled the chain between her shackles taut. He choked on a crushed windpipe and went down in seconds. If she had tried to choke him the long way he would have likely gotten free with her dagger and she would in trouble. Don't move or the arrow make a home in you thigh. Sakura froze, feeling the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. She was in trouble regardless of what she did. Keep her from running, she's the one he'll want. Don't lower your arrows, fool. There were 2 more men, making a total of 3 voices surrounding her. Slowly, Sakura raised her hands above her head, palms up in a gesture of surrender. Don't move, we have our points on you, slave. Sakura snarled to herself, hating the feeling of losing. She had fire in her blood and her front was stinging. She needed to keep moving, she needed to fight her way out, but she started to turn and the sound of a string's snap came before the fire bloomed from the place where the arrow grazed her ribs. She bit her lip and drew blood in her mouth. Don't. You kill her and he'll have our heads. She's already killed one of our men. You want to be next. Did you forget the whole point of our mission out here? I was careful. The last voice finally called out to her. Rest the chain behind your head and keep your hands up. Move in a way we don't like and it won't go well for you, otherwise you don't have a reason to fear. Sakura did as she was instructed, wincing when the tear from the arrow in her side made her wince. She was bleeding from 2 new places, not counting her mouth. One of the guards came to stand in front of her and she didn't see anything about his face to make it worth her memory. The guard in front of her had a short sword and he used it to turn her around and make her walk. She followed the 2 Romans in front of her as they led her around another cropping of rocks down to a path where more figures waited. Sakura wanted to scowl and spit when she recognized the slavers. At their feet were the bodies of 3 different slaves with arrows making their backs look like pin cushions. Their slaughter was excessive, but she wasn't one to judge. She had the blood of just as many on her hands. What is this? A sharp voice asked. Indra. Sakura looked up and saw the only one with a face sharp with details. He was staring down at her like she was just as clear. Maybe she was. Maybe that was how actors saw dreamers. Either way, his stare was still fixed on her with no sign of it venturing off elsewhere. The cruel slaver smirked to himself, taking a step towards Sakura and slapping her elbow. The slaver circled and she could feel his eyes won her. Is what you were waiting for. How many did your 10 girl kill before you brought her in? 2. But she injured others, a meeker voice added, speaking to the commander and not to the slaver. Their leader grunted in acknowledgement. But was she chained and restricted from using any chakra? The slaver pressed, sounding tense. What good is the history? Tell me what she is worth. They only saw 1 body, the Roman leader replied, pressing his heels into the side of his mount so he could stand closer to Sakura, still staring down at her. The Roman who had led her away with his short sword at her back poked her again and she flinched, taking a half step forward. He waved his sword at her legs where the dried blood was dark and flaking. There may be others. She has too much blood on her legs for peace and hiding. He looked up at his leader and saw the dark-haired Uchiha was still watching Sakura. Indra looked over Sakura's shoulder at his subordinate and glared. Sakura suspected he didn't like being addressed by his first name, but he could have been in a sour mood for other reasons. She'll have to do, that's not in question, but price is still the objective. Is she worth as much as my brother's girl? That depends on how many she killed, the Roman at her back replied, lowering his sword. How many men have not reported back, including the ones we know to be dead? Sakura saw out of the corner of her eye, the expression that took over the partially covered face of the cruel slaver. He looked like the cat that got the cream and it made shivers run up and down her spine. He looked smug, like things were going the way he said they would. They were going to buy one of his slaves, so why shouldn't he look smug? He was going to make money off of her, she was going to make him richer. That smug look was for her. After days of her in his chains, he was finally going to make her into something. Something that tasted like ash and rage made her belly hot. She moved fast enough that no one expected it when she slammed her bound hands down and grabbed the short sword for herself. The Roman she took the sword from was still too shocked to react as sidestepping with the blade and launching herself into a spin that carried the full force of her downward momentum into the face of her cruel slaver. Her short sword sunk easily and she knew she had hit her mark when a gusher of red coated her hands. There was shouting all around her and she dropped the short sword and kept her hands up before bending to rest on one knee. Around her people were shouting as the other slavers rushed to their dead friend. One looked disgusted and the other looked ticked off. Sakura grunted as she was pushed into the dirt and a pair of bodies stepped on her, putting pressure on her neck and hands. There were a number of new blades drawn out around her as well, in case she should try to move again. She wouldn't, but they didn't know that. Who is in charge of finances now? Indra asked, voice stern as he rode his horse over. From where her face was pressed into the ground Sakura could see hooves and little else. She tried to turn slightly and blood bloomed on her neck from where a Roman pointed his arrow's tip. There was a clink of heavy metal and gold pieces spilled down in front of Sakura, drawing her attention back. The commander's sandals were down in the sand and walking towards them. Get off of her, he barked, and someone went flying. Katetsu, take her and put her on my horse. You and Azumo will flank me. Sakura was rolled over and two new faces came into focus as the new men dressed in red and white helped her up. Sakura felt herself wince from the sharp throb from her open wounds. But even her wounds couldn't keep her from staring when she was able to make out the sharp details of the two faces in front of her. She assumed they were Katetsu and Azumo, but whoever they were actors. One wore his hair long and pushed back, while the other had his comb to one side to hide an eye. Both had similarly dark eyes and matching weary expressions. They began to turn her around, no doubt intending to do as they were told, but Indra called out to them once more. Sakura looked up as the Uchiha commander approached. Indra stopped in front of her and pinched her jaw, turning her face one way and then the other. Do you know you're the most expensive slave I've ever bought? He hummed, watching her with vivid red eyes that seemed to spin. I'm not a slave, Sakura bit out, remembering what it felt like to burn with the hate that set her insides on fire. You are for now, because as cruel as you are, you were weak enough to earn these shackles. He tapped her wrists. This is your punishment, life will do that. Until you are stronger you are property, my property. I'll kill again. I hope you do. You are my champion. My brother holds a weapons expert who was worth 10 gold links, so we called her 10. I do not wish to give you a name. You are slave, or you are girl. You will not be called by a name until you earn it with your first victory in a ring. His fingers left her face and he took a step back. For you I paid double what the last girl was worth. Do not disappoint me. He turned away from her and walked without looking back. They had traveled back to a port, Sakura on the back of the Uchiha's mount, still shackled and tied like a sack of potatoes. The men, Katetsu and Azumo, didn't talk much, or if they did it wasn't in front of their commander or the prisoner. Still, Sakura could see they were close. There was a good deal of nonverbal language that passed between them, even if she couldn't recognize it. They took her to the ocean and stuffed her in what was likely a closet, since she laid on a sack of potatoes and had to push away a wooden bucket and mop to fit in the cramped space. They didn't offer apologies or explanations, but the one with the crazier hair did come back later with a rough tarp to leave on her knees, in case of the cold, as he put it. It wasn't much, but Sakura would take the kindness where she could get it. She felt when they turned back to sea, as the ship left dock with a lurch and dip, bobbing on the rolling waves before straightening out. The salt and brine were heavy in her nostrils as the scents drifted through the aged wood of her walls. She breathed deep, and pretended she didn't miss the water. Sakura sat in silence, waiting for the dream world around her to ebb or grow taut. She even laid her head down and tried to go to sleep, but there was no sight of the dream ending. The world around her was firm and full. She wouldn't be waking up anytime soon, but there looked to be no major activity worth her attention. She would have to sit in silence, entertained only by her thoughts. It was no better than when she dreamed of trekking through the sand for days on end. This gait would kill her with monotony. Maybe it was hours later, maybe it was only minutes, but later there were voices overhead to draw her attention upwards. The boards above her creaked and she heard a shuffle of worn soles on wood. Someone mumbled something and then there was a slap. Just curious. A new voice whined, sounding cranky and pitched. You'll stay away from the lower holds if you value your head where it is. No, friend, it wasn't the head, just the brain. You didn't see it happen. I saw the mess. There was a low whistle and someone chuckled before more shuffling. That's just what they're saying cause she's a drink for the Legionnaire, There was a thud, like someone jumping down from a height. Yeah, she was quite a sight, but that don't mean nothing but they wanted it convincing. Go back to your post, man. That voice she recognized, but she couldn't remember which of the two men it belonged to, either Katetsu or Azumo. Which one had the long brown hair cut over one eye? Rumors like that will land you on the leash. Someone laughed mockingly and there was more shuffling. More time passed before the voices rejoined. She could always hear something, but she suspected they would have to be directly overhead for her to be able to clearly hear them speaking. There were words exchanged about Norther expansion and ghouls, the burning at the library men couldn't get over, and something about lots being unfavorable with the new season of fighters. Sakura tried to doze, but sleep wouldn't come and the dream was too real to let her go, even as the cracks of light faded from something bright to a faded memory. She didn't hunger, but she knew if she did, she would have been famished for so long without food. The world around her was oddly reminiscent of the kingdom of beasts in a way she couldn't quite put her finger on. There was something, a feeling, she couldn't shake. The culture and the country were ones she recognized easily enough from history books, but the last gate felt as taut and tense as the second kingdom on her obelisk. Brutal. You must be brutal, the voice inside Sakura's heart echoed. It was a truth she wished to turn over and never have to look at again. Blood made this world run. She would have to remember how to spill it more affectionately if she was going to survive, but this time there was no Kisame or Zabuza to critique her stance or par with her blade. For now she was alone, she had no one. There was a knock on the door before it began to swing open. No on yet. It was either the boy Katetsu or Izumo, the one with the long spiky hair that had first brought her the blanket. In his hands he held a tray with food on it. He looked on the verge of panic when she caught his eye. Oh, don't let Izumo know I forgot your dinner. We're supposed to be keeping you well fed now, but I forgot. We haven't have a live prisoner to take care of in so long, it escaped me. She made a guess. You are the one called Katetsu. That's me. Ah, the other one I was just talking about, he's in my unit and we graduated together. You'll see him too, he helps me take care of you, or he will, like he does, or, not like that. Ah, here, this is supposed to be your food. Do you need help eating it? I will manage, Sakura mused, looking down at the plate where various meats aside than fish sat atop a plate of rice and bread. For being on a shipping vessel, it was a luxurious meal in comparison to what the others would likely be getting served. Too good to be true. That food's too rich. It'll make me sick all at once. I won't be able to finish it all. The boy looked a little taken aback, staring down at the food and then her face. Ah, then, eat what you can. I can tell the others not to bother with the fancy food. Basics like bread and green things are okay though, right? Sakura shifted in her seat atop the crate as best she could, moving her wrists onto her lap and into plain, open sight. Her eyes narrowed at his own unfettered wrists. It will do, Sakura answered in a bored tone. That's good. It will be another day and a half of sailing with good winds to reach port, but don't count on getting lucky. We might be light cargo, but we're under a cruel fate. The gods do us no kindness. Sakura hated the idea of more mindless days for travel where nothing would happen in the dream, but resolved to white-knuckle through it. She shifted towards the food and the chain between her wrists slipped down, off her knees. Katetsu caught her eye. When will these shackles come off? Sakura asked. Not until we reach the estate house. When she glared he chuckled in good humor. Don't look so upset. We're not bread-brained like the fool Carthaginians. We know better than to remove your bindings, lest you kill or run away. What if I gave you my word that I wouldn't? Sakura asked, leaning forward, her body taking on a posture of hope. Katetsu smiled at her, but it was a smile full of pity. What use is the word of a slave? He ducked his head and left her to the food. No one else came to visit Sakura that night, and before she knew it the world outside was dark and lit only by stars and a waxing moon. Still, the dream world refused to end or even give any indication of possibly coming to an end. Time was such a hard concept to measure within the dream, but Sakura could have sworn this was the longest she had ever stayed awake in a dream. It was near maddening. When dawn broke, Sakura felt no more tired nor did she feel any closer to the tension that preceded the ending of every dream. A boy whose face lacked details came into her room and took her plate of untouched food and left her rice and vegetables in a bowl. They were still steaming and smelled richly of seasonings, but Sakura had no hunger, so she refused to eat. The same thing happened for lunch. When dinner came, it was Kotetsu who delivered the meal. He frowned at the plate she left untouched and insisted on checking the skin of her face for fever and her wrists for a weak pulse, but she was unchanged. Is this a hunger strike? We're only going to be at sea for one more day, maybe a little more. What do you hope to accomplish? Sakura rattled her shackles and glared. I give you my word, I won't run away or hurt you. He gave her the same sad smile full of pity before leaving her again. Still, the dream went on, spanning another similar day, an untouched breakfast and an ignored lunch. By the time her third meal came, she was nearly mad from anxiety, but Kotetsu's face in the doorway made her anger white and simmering. She collected her rages under her skin and held it all back, saving it for later. Like the night before, they exchanged words. He was worried about her eating. Nothing they had brought her had been touched. They didn't know she didn't need food inside the dream, so naturally they began to grow worried. Kotetsu left and came back with his friend Izumo, who checked her eyes and skin and heart rate for sickness, only to find nothing unusual. What are we going to do? Kotetsu asked, trying to keep his voice to a whisper as he conversed with his friend in the far corner. The room was far too small to keep any privacy in conversation, but it seemed they didn't really care if she heard them or now. We'll be in port tomorrow morning, midday at the latest. She will last till then. I doubt Ibiki will let her starve herself. When they left, Sakura paced, falling into squats and push-ups for no reason other than to escape the mounting boredom that threatened to turn her mad. She worked until she sweat and then began to thrash against the walls. She clawed at things, throwing her whole body into her fit. Her nails were bloody from the tantrum when she fell back against the wall. She was still shaking and she wondered if she was having a fit when Kotetsu and a nameless boy came rushing in to see what had happened. Izumo came in a little later, his expression stern and uncaring as he took in the damaged property and bloodstains left from where she broke skin. The nameless boy reached for her hands and she snarled at him, making him retreat on a single, cracking cry of fear. He fell backwards onto his rump and scooted away, leaving Kotetsu to reach for Sakura on her own. What happened? Kotetsu asked, still looking her over. Take the damn shackles off, or so help me, there will be no reason for my kindness, Sakura seethed, feeling the hair that fell in front of her face stick to her skin with sweat. She was still shaking and glaring and hoping she looked mean enough to kill, because she sure felt it. We told you. Sakura reached and her bloody hands were around his neck, thumbs pressed to the point where his throat bulged. She could pop him like a pimple on reflex and he would be dead. It was the way Kisame taught her. The other two males in the room reacted violently, one scrambling away, the other racing towards his friend. Sakura saw Izumo and threw Kotetsu out so the two boys collapsed together. Don't think I couldn't kill you or that I'm not dangerous because of these shackles. These things will never guarantee your protection. You nearly killed him, Izumo snapped. And I could have, but I didn't. Sakura rattled her chains. Take these off of me. For a while no one moved, and Sakura thought she had gone too far. She had snapped in the worst possible way and now they were going to do something worse than shackle her, but her head was a mess and she thought she was going to go mad. She had been awake too long and nothing had happened. She wasn't meant for this. Whatever they were going to say, Kotetsu at least held his words back when he saw her tears begin to slip free. Beside him, Izumo huffed. You're a slave, we owe you nothing. If we have to incapacitate you, we will. No more noise from you. The crew is trying to sleep. He picked up his friend and dragged him out, slamming the door shut and leaving Sakura alone in the dim. Sakura felt heavy, but not the way a person would feel heavy after a long run. No, her weightiness came from something else, something emotional. Her spirit was weary, and it had little to do with the feeling of shackles on her wrists. She hated what the chains made her feel. She felt beaten and humbled, and it was too much for too long after all the worlds that worshipped her in the dream. It was natural for the dreamer to be loved, to be desired. There was a natural pull that attracted actors to the dreamer, and she saw it in the way Pain cared for her, how Kisame took her under his wing, how Kiba adored her, how Madara loved her. She bit her cheek before she could say Sasori's name. No, Sasori wasn't like that. Yeah, he liked her, loved her even, but it wasn't because he was an actor and she was a dreamer. She knew it in her heart that he had planted himself there. She missed Sai. Sai was supposed to come to her and offer words of comfort and encouragement. He was supposed to tell her he believed in her and that she would be able to win this time, after centuries of others failing. Sai was supposed to be next to her, but he was dead because she killed him. This isn't fair, Sakura cried into the wood grains of the dirty floorboards. Her body shivers as she rolled onto her side and curled up in a ball. No, it's not fair, but that is the whole point of curses. Sakura looked up at the new voice and saw Baki standing in the corner. He was shaking his head with disapproval, but the side of his face blocked by cloth never peeked through. Really? I thought you would have understood that by now. What are you doing here? Sakura asked, hope budding in her chest. I observe. Sakura coughed, shifting and feeling her lungs wince. When she woke up she would be bloody and sore. You're not going to tell me something important, like, I'll have to do this or go here or meet this person in order to succeed. Baki stared her down, silently for a time before finally answering. No, not at all. You will be doing this on your own. She felt the old embers of her anger snap to life again. What are you good for then? She wanted Sai back. Damn, at this rate even Hayate would be better. At least Hayate was someone she could talk to a little bit. Baki seemed cold, not just removed, but also dismissive of her. She didn't know how good she had it with Sai. Every day she missed him more. When she looked up, Baki was gone and she wanted to scream, but she was too tired. What had been the point of him watching her and talking to her like that? He did nothing but make her feel small. He didn't help and he didn't try to hinder her. It didn't make sense why he would do anything. If he wanted to observe her, why appear where she could see him watching her? Knowing someone saw her in chains inspired shame in Sakura's heart. She didn't want anyone seeing her in chains. She wasn't a slave. She had a name. She was worth more than this. It was night, but then morning broke and there were loud voices up above Sakura's head. The voices grew louder and then there were cheers. They were crying out for land, they had sight of land. Soon they would dock and the next stage in her dream would begin. Sakura reached out, trying to feel the edges of her dream, to taste and see where it would end. There was no end to it, and for a moment she feared her dream might last forever. Time meant nothing in a dream. She might just sleep for a day and have it seem like a week or a month or a year. She would wake up the next morning forgetting how to live in the world of reality because all she could remember for centuries was a world inside of a dream. The thought made her spine ramrod straight in fear. Her door was opened and she looked up to see a round ball land on the floor close to her. It was hissing smoke. The door slammed shut and Sakura heard the click as her cabin filled up with the billowing fumes. There was light behind her eyes and her head began to drift, feeling light. Sakura cursed, falling off her seat and onto her knees. Her lungs expanded on a painful cough and she bent over, hacking. It sounded like ripping bedsheets as she doubled over. She fell onto her side and kicked the empty ball away with her heels, coughing up what was left of her lungs. The door opened and men rushed in. She was too slow and light-headed to stop them as a black sack hood was slipped over her head and tied off. Shackles went on her ankles and she jerked at the feel of a metal collar around her neck. The chain was heavy under her chin, connecting her collar to her hands to her ankles. Sakura was still so light from the smoke, but she could feel the weight and wanted to cry. What she must look like. One set of shackles was bad enough, but now there was no escaping it. She was bound like a slave and lifted onto the shoulder of a sailor like she was no better than flour in a sack. She wanted to say something, but when she began to scream, one of the sailors slapped the side of her face so hard her head snapped. Someone else swore and she was shifted to someone new. Sakura couldn't help it. She cried a little, unable to even touch the stinging of her cheek. It hurt and there was nothing she could do. No one cared, there were no actors, and even those who were around her didn't seem attached to her like they had been in other kingdoms or gate worlds. Not like the other dream worlds at all. She heard speaking. Put her on the mule, she'll ride along with the other two, but keep her in the middle. If one of them falls off, it shouldn't be her. She's the expensive one. She was dropped over an animal's back and next she felt two other bound bodies laid down on either side of her. Moments later the uneven journey began. It was a mess of bumps and stumbles later when the animal finally stopped and the sounds and smells of the port market were distant and absent from her senses. The sun was hotter on her back than before as well. She felt the change in where the mule was walking as it switched from dusty road to stone path. Something made the steps of those around her echo, and Sakura itched to be rid of her hood. There was more talking, but someone was pulling the other two slaves down and their chains were so loud Sakura couldn't hear anything much, and what little she did hear, she couldn't match to a face. That's the one, take her to the stables. Ibi isn't in a good mood today. When is he ever in a good mood? You don't want to save it. She looks tired. He'll rip her to shreds. She was worth double the average fare, she should be able to stand up against his probing. Take her there now. I'll have the maids take care of these two kids. Speaking of kids, you have in the words were in and out, blurring in Sakura's ears as she too was lifted up and shifted so her chains slid around against her shackles and collar. She was led somewhere, yanked and prodded when she didn't stubble fast enough for whoever was leading her. She smelled the stable when they arrived, and heard the animals greet and preen on their own in stalls not far from where Sakura was dragged in. Another violent tug pulled her into a pile of hay and then something closed behind her. A door. The person leading her bent down and began to unclip the shackles around her ankles and then the collar around her neck. He tugged on the hood and pulled it free right before slipping out to leave her in her wrist shackles alone and confused atop a bed of hay. Moments later she heard voices outside the stall. One of them she recognized, the other was new. A tall scarred man opened the stall door and Indra stepped in, dressed brilliantly in crimson and white. His sandals were of well-crafted leather and his legs looked all the better in them. Sakura lifted her head and observed the rest of the man who bought her and kept herself from paying any more compliments. She would hate this man. They told me you refused to eat. Sakura kept her lips pressed tight. She doubted they had color anymore as she insisted on silently glaring up at him. She wouldn't say anything she didn't want to. Indra didn't seem concerned with her refusal to answer. He tilted his chin up and looked her over, stepping closer and touching the side of her face. She flinched in reflex, not meaning to show weakness. He frowned at her reaction. Someone will come in to treat this immediately. Food will be brought as well. He grabbed her chain and his fingers pressed parts of her swollen face, digging painfully into the reddened skin on purpose. You will eat and you will cooperate. There were no threats, only orders. He dropped her face and her whole body fell backwards into the hay. He shook his hand as if she had been something dusty or dirty and walked towards the exit. Ibiki, see to it she is dealt with and once all is in place I want her gutted. Someone else who wasn't the scarred man heard the order for food and scampered off, bare feet slapping against the wood of the stables. Indra waited by the door with his arms crossed and his chin lifted as the man with a face that had seen the sharp end of a blade more than once, bent down in front of Sakura. His hand glowed a sickly green and Sakura thought of her own healing chakra. She closed her eyes, welcoming the sensation, but when his chakra met her face it stung. She tried to pull away but he held her down and healed her face with his biting chakra, even as the sensation brought tears to her eyes. When it was all over she looked up and saw that the man in scars was talking to Indra about something resistant when a boy came in with rice and vegetables in a bowl. Ibiki took the food and the spoon and turned back to Sakura. She knew better, but she still backed away when he approached her. He held her hand and she cried before he could force anything into her mouth, saying she would cooperate. I'll do it. I'll do it. Stop. Ibiki grunted, dropping the food onto her lap where it spilled. Pathetic. To crack so soon. Indra glared down at the arms he had crossed over his chest. That's not a great matter to me. Her mental state need not diminish her fighting prowess. See that her hands are well protected throughout the ordeal. I don't want her thrashing and breaking her wrist like the last one. Whatever I break I can fix. Just don't make it messy. Indra looked up over the scarred man and tilted his head to one side, studying Sakura from a different angle. If she stays in one piece we can let her out in the boneyard tomorrow. That's a bit soon for such a kid. Sakura made sure to stuff her face and swallow down the food she couldn't taste as the two older men talked about her like she wasn't even there. She wasn't a human, she was a bought item. She was a thing in their eyes and they wouldn't see her any differently for as long as she dressed in shackles. Sakura stopped eating and set the half-finished bowl down. She licked the corner of her lips but didn't make a move to go for anything more. She ate. That's what they wanted. Take these shackles off me, she ventured, holding out her wrists. I swore I wouldn't try to run away. Ibiki didn't even look at her, but reached down for the bowl and handed it back to the boy who peeked through from the doorway. Indra watched, but didn't let his eyes meet hers. She wasn't a human, so he wouldn't look her in the eye. Why would he do such a thing? I'll leave you to it, Ibiki, Indra said, turning and leaving. Sakura wanted to scream. He was an actor, but he was treating her, the dreamer, like she was nothing more than cattle on his chopping block. That wasn't how things were supposed to go. Actors always cared for the dreamers. But Indra was being more than just cold. He was letting her get hurt, putting her in painful situations, and denying her identity as a human being. He was hurting her and not caring about it. Ibiki too. He was an actor's on account of how well she could see his scarred face, but he didn't look like he cared for her much either. When will these come off? Sakura asked, holding out her wrists. Ibiki ignored her, picking out dirt from underneath his fingernails. Sakura waited a moment and then opened her mouth to repeat herself, but Baki's hand caught her throat and pushed her down. His eyes were black steel and she wanted to run from them. She hated feeling so afraid, but she was still in shackles and there was nothing else she could do. You will tell me everything. I will rip apart your mind and know all your secrets, and you will be nothing. You are nothing. You have no name. Sakura felt the sickly green chakra buzz around her neck and then it was in his other hand, and that hand was reaching for her eyes. She squirmed, trying to writhe free, but he was strong, stronger than her. He kept her from twisting away and the next thing that happened was his green chakra began to leak into her brain, scorching the eyes and making her blind for the rest of the interrogation. Sakura screamed for hours. She cried herself hoarse afterwards and then night fell. Finally, the dream world snapped and Sakura was awake in her bed, clean and unharmed, but utterly broken. Sakura cried into her pillow, reaching out to rub her fingers over the raised places where her shackles dug into her skin. Sakura almost didn't go to bed that next night. She could drink 6 cups of coffee and stay awake all through the night like she had once or twice. She knew how to, and she knew it was possible. She had motive and means, but the 11th hour came and she hadn't started the pot, nor did she make any more to brew stimulants for herself. Being the last week of February, a snap cold spell colored her world in white overnight. It would snow occasionally, but it hadn't lasted until the end of the winter season when Jack Frost decided to make up for lost time and down then whirled in ice while Sakura dreamed about a man in scars pulling apart her mind until up was down and red was blue and sight was sound. Sakura glanced down at her phone and flipped back and forth between the sets of text messages she was getting from Karen and Suigetsu. They were fighting again, but it was the petty sort of fighting they would always be caught up in. Those two were good together, they gave as good as they got with each other, and they were learning how to be better for the other. Still, That didn't mean Sakura didn't worry and monitor their ups and downs on her own. When Karen needed to talk, Sakura was there, and even if it was Suigetsu who needed an ear to listen, Sakura was also there. Amy said Sakura was officially #team always gives relationship advice but never is the one. The phone refreshed but there were still no new messages and Sakura didn't doubt both parties were settling in. Karen worked early tomorrow and Suigetsu was taking the morning to see a dentist about his stupid teeth. The inactivity was normal, but for some reason it made Sakura's hands shake. Her friends were going to sleep, and soon she would be next. But I always wake up, she told herself out loud. You always what? Sakura turned to see Amy standing on the stairwell looking groggy. It was close to midnight. What are you doing up so late? Sakura asked, redirecting. Sakura was sitting cross-legged on the couch in front of the turned-off television, so when she spoke she had to sit up and twist her body around to see Amy. The smaller Asian girl yawned before coming down the last few steps. I was thinking about talking to you about something. Oh. Sakura shifted in her seat and moved to the corner so Amy could share the couch, pulling down the sleeves on her sweater to hide the marks on her wrists. Cold weather was good for something. Amy had brought a blanket with her and it was one of the overly soft, fuzzy ones that were always more expensive than they were worth, but it didn't stop someone from spoiling their daughter for Christmas. Yeah, but I don't know, I mean, it's just talking. I'm good at just talking, Sakura answered. She reached over and poked the exposed part of Ami's leg. What is it? My dad has a friend who teaches fashion photography at a university and there is a 8-week program they can get me into in a few weeks. Sakura felt her eyes widen. Wow, someone is going places. A small, exclusive photography internship in Europe, whatever do you have to think over? It's 8 weeks though, and my French isn't great. I mean, sometimes it's better than my English, but French is like, hard. They're super picky and mean about it over there and I know I'll need it if I go. I don't know if I could do it. It sounds high class and I just run a blog. A nice blog with a high traffic count. What was the hit counter reading yesterday? Over 100,000 unique visitors in a week. That is nothing to sneeze at. People do better with video game vlogs. Video games are fun, but Amy, photography is what you want. Sakura scooted closer. You're so lucky because you have a dream in your heart now and your dad is putting the tools you need straight into your hands. You don't have a reason to live with the regret if you choose not to go. I don't know if I'll do well. Maybe you won't. Maybe you fail and end up hating photography. Maybe you strike gold in the Grand Canyon. I don't know. No one can see the future. Sakura, Amy whined, pouting at the thought of having to face reality. Listen, Amy, no one can tell you what will happen, but at least if it's in Europe you can come back and tell us anything and we'll believe you. When her friend didn't say anything more, Sakura poked Amy again until the younger girl looked up. Don't you want to try? I don't want to leave my friends. I feel like you'll go somewhere without me if I leave. Sakura smiled wistfully, looking around her house. It was the same as it seemed last year and maybe it would change this year, but Sakura doubted it. The world around her felt frozen. Ever since she entered the obelisk dreams her life was put on hold and there were no signs of it starting up again with the way the last gate was treating her. I don't think I'll ever leave where I am here. Sakura forced herself to grin. Amy pouted again. You could at least say you'd miss me and find it unbearable without my presence. We've been roommates long enough that you should at least feel something about seeing me off. Oh, won't you just be devastated without me? Karen's too wrapped up in her boy and you still don't trust Ino. I feel like I can't leave you like this. Sakura's smile became a little easier to hold on her face as she thought about how close she and Amy had grown. It was true, they didn't start out as the closest of friends, but now they were better than that. A year of living together of roommates drew them closer, and the reality that Amy might actually leave Sakura alone made her want to reconsider her words. Sakura reached out and poked her friend's nose, refusing to do anything but grin for Amy. Don't worry about me. I want you to do what you know you need to. Don't live with your regrets. Go for it. She didn't know all the details of what he was attempting, but she knew enough to guess that her status as a dreamer had something to do with his inability to invade her mind like he would with the other actors. He would need to give up soon or keep her in the stables indefinitely because there is no way she would break now that she was beginning to believe she had the power to keep him out. With what little autonomy she had left, she would preserve what remained hers, including her thoughts and memories. Ibiki raised a hand as if to stick her across the face with it, but grunted and turned away to pace at the opposite end of the room. It only took him a few strides before he calmed and approached her again. There are always obstacles, but you can't resist forever. You can't keep trying forever either, Sakura coughed. No, but I can keep trying long enough. He stepped closer, near looming. I will last longer than you. And then he was back again in her brain, tilling it like a rocky field with sickles dug deep into the soil, overturning and piling mounds of her into neat little rows as he attempted to break through her barriers, to shatter the bedrock of her mind under all that tilling. It was a mess and Sakura cried every time a piece of her was overturned because it was a piece of her that hadn't meant to be overturned or touched or manipulated. She wanted to push back, to rip her from her mind and dash him against the walls of the stables, but all she could manage was screams. Her throat cracked and broke at points, but she made a hell for his ears as best she could. Whatever he was looking for, he wouldn't find it in her. That is enough. Sakura fell limp into the hay. Ibiki turned to greet the new arrival and Sakura forced her eyes to open just enough for her to peek through her lashes. His hair was nicer, but combed down in front of half of his face. She searched her memory for the name and caught it. Azumo. This was the meaner of the two, the one who was angry at her for threatening his friend in a bid to earn their trust. Ironic, he would be the one interrupting her torture. She knew he didn't care for her or even about her, if his past actions were indicative of anything. She will need physical training as well as mental. You've had more than your share of time with her and now she's hardly worth the effort to pull out of the filth. You can have her once this is done. I didn't come here asking for your permission. I have my own orders to follow. Follow them tomorrow, or when I'm finished with her. Azumo looked like the skin around his eyes was too taut, but he kept his anger to a simmer just below the surface. He crossed his arms over his chest and shifted the weight of his body from one foot to the other in an effort to achieve a posture that said he didn't care what the scarred man said. Were you able to see what sort of history she has? Do you know who her teachers have been, what her education has been, what her hands have killed? Surely you must know the beginning to those things. You've spent so much time together, I would assume you know her wholly and completely by now. There was more than a little sarcasm in his tone. No matter what you might think, what I do is delicate, requiring the utmost precision and patience. Don't seek to rush me. I'm not the only one here who you might think is being inconsiderate of your art, or have you forgotten that she needs physical prep for her fights? She wasn't bought for so much to sit around in the hay and play mind games with you. Azumo rolled his eyes. We have other slaves for that. Ibiki closed his eyes, looking resigned. Is that an order? It will be soon if I don't get what I want. Azumo glanced at Sakura and the sight of her made him grimace. I should have started the day she first came back, but you've kept her too long and she's already exhausted. She's not to be taken out onto the property until I've approved her. Then approve her. Ibiki looked like he wanted to bite his tongue. The unspoken exclamation of, I can't, hung in the air between them and it made the scarred man all the more unsettled. If there was friendship between the two of them, and Sakura doubted there was, it was all but gone now. Ibiki had murder in his eyes as he turned away and stormed out. I'll take that as an okay, Azumo muttered under his breath to himself before turning towards her. Absently he brushed aside the heavy bangs that fell in front of his right eye and Sakura caught a glimpse of the scar that ran over his lid at a crooked angle. Sakura looked away when his eyes landed on her face, but if he minded that she saw it wasn't apparent. Where are we going? Sakura asked, catching her breath sharply when he tugged on her chains and the sore parts of her wrists throbbed. It would be days before the evidence of her shackles healed enough for short sleeves. Good thing it was cold when she woke up. Get up and walk, Azumo, he barked, not paying her question any heed. He sounded bored of her, actually. Sakura wanted to fight him, she wanted to dig in her heels and snarl like the junkyard dogs she's seen before. Her arms tensed, bunching up and getting ready to pull back, but Sakura hushed her raging spirit and fought down her impulses. She wasn't going to run, no matter how much she was tempted to fight for her freedom. There would be a time to fight, but it wasn't now. Azumo led her out of the stables and out across a long stretch of mostly open land before they came upon a well dug into the ground and surrounded by marble stone cut straight from a quarry not too far from the property. Azumo dropped her chain in order to pull up the rope that was attached to a bucket. Once at the top, he unhooked the odd-looking container and poured the water into a clay pot that was set aside the mound of marble. Done. He replaced the bucket on the rope and let it fall the rest of the way down. You'll carry your own water. Spill it and you'll have to go the day without it. Azumo stepped away from the well and didn't touch a thing more, leaving her chain on the ground in the dust as well as the clay jug of water. When he kept moving, Sakura took that as her cue to follow and scrambled to take up the job and carry what was left of her dragging chain. When Sakura looked over her back, the stable was small in the distance and her feet weren't heavy, but she could feel the phantom sensation of weariness. They had been walking quite a while when the path dipped down and the dust cleared away enough for Sakura to see the pit dug out and built up. Don't get too excited, this is just the training grounds. He walked ahead and then stopped, sand settling around his still feet in subtle mounds. You'll need to prove yourself here before we start using you. You don't think I can fight? Sakura bit out, setting her bot down, but not before taking a taste of the water. It was cool and a treat to her sore throat, but she was in the dream world and that meant she had no true need for water or food. Still, she didn't need to let them know that. Any animal afraid of dying can surprise the world. What can you actually do? He asked, turning suddenly and throwing a small knife at the clay pot still in her hands. Water and pottery gushed over her wrists as the piece burst between her fingers and stopped the knife from hitting her chest. Sakura jumped back, knowing there was no cover, there wasn't supposed to be. Arenas where men and women fought to the death weren't supposed to be areas where you could find an advantage in the terrain or use your head. No, people wanted contact and blood and death. There was nowhere she could run from it. Azumo was someone close to Indra and Sakura knew why. Sakura threw out her senses as best she could with the chakra shackles still limiting her abilities. She wanted to weigh the world down and drag it all into slow motion so she could see the hands that were reaching for her face, but she couldn't do much other than try her best to stay ahead of the jabs. She missed one strike and his hand made it to her neck with a python's finesse. She choked, feeling herself being lifted off the ground as he flexed his hand and made bruises in her skin. Sakura gasped, feeling her eyes bulge and her legs kick. There was nothing she could do here. He had her in one of the worst possible ways. Not so fun, is it? He asked in a dry tone before he let her go to fall into a heap at his feet, kicking up sand and dust that choked her nose and mouth. Sakura gasped, lungs screaming as new air rushed in. I don't think you are worth what he paid for you. You were lucky and you were sneaky. You will not be worth the time to lift my eyelids when I see you fight. You. Sakura could hardly form words. It all hurt and she wanted to cry for a friendly face. He shifted and Sakura felt it in the hairs on her arm before she actually saw the movement. She reacted quickly, thinking she was dodging a sword at first, but the hand that passed over her head was nothing more than flesh. She wasn't training with Kisame again, but it felt similar. He had taught her how to dodge and duck almost as well as Tsunade had. Unlike Tsunade, Kisame and Sakura spent months together. What her brain didn't remember, her body did. Sakura felt the bruises on her neck and used every part of her body to move and dodge so there wouldn't be any more marks when she woke up. Scarf. I can hide it with a scarf. Sakura caught his fist in the worst way, with her chest. The wind left her lungs and she was sent backwards only to land up in a heap of tangled limbs on the ground. If I had been holding a knife, you would have been dead. That wouldn't have been fair. Sakura spit, knowing the words were wasted air. Nothing in the curse world was fair. Depending on how much your sponsor or owner likes you, the matches will never be fair. Sometimes there are weapons, sometimes there are not. Azumo stalked closer to her but stopped an arm's reach away. Sometimes a man goes in with nothing but a cloth for his dignity while his opponent glistens in armor. It's all for a good show, nothing more. Sakura looked up slowly and Azumo smirked at the fear he must have read in her expression. Are you going to ask how much our dear Lord likes you? Azumo knelt down and the smile on his face made Sakura want to turn and run. Her stomach was sick when he spoke. Not enough to make it easy for you. His brother might have, if he had been the one to pick you out, but, it's never fair. What does that mean? It means you better get better about fighting barehanded against a man with a knife. You don't want to die just yet, do you? Sakura wanted to snarl and bite into the man's neck with her teeth. Take off these shackles and I'll show you what you want out of me. I can't. Rules are rules. If you weren't shackled, you would be too dangerous to keep alive. Sakura snarled, feeling the anger make an ember in her chest she could hold onto. She was all sharp angles and wide strokes. Fueled with a desire to strike that smirk from his face, she refused to relent as she pressed the advantage. She was too wild and just fast enough that he began to retreat, likely counting on her to get tired so he could take advantage of when she faltered. In the dream and in her shackles there were a lot of things Sakura wasn't good at, but one of them wasn't her endurance, and she knew how to play to that. It didn't take much longer before she started to see the worry bloom in the other man's eyes. She was too wild and too loud with her screams for her to go much longer, but she didn't stop, didn't falter, didn't let up, didn't give him an opening. Who would exhaust first? Him from dodging and blocking, or her from striking and screaming? His frustration started to show and he made a move that she took advantage of and twisted into, bringing her leg up between them to kick him back. All that work and all she got was one kick in, but boy was it worth it. He tumbled over himself, dust rising in a cloud where he landed and struggled to his feet. She could see through the sand cloud his glare for her. Excellent stamina, a new voice said. Sakura looked over her shoulder to see the other boy, the one with the wild hair at the edge of the ring walking towards them. He was smiling. Kotetsu, I thought you were elsewhere. You said you were too busy to help. You didn't say what you needed help with. I heard that she hadn't been cleared yet. What are the two of you doing out here? Kotetsu asked, looking between the two of them easily. Azumo snapped. What does it look like, you fool? It looks like she's going to kick your butt. You better pray those shackles never come off. Both boys looked to the shackles on her wrists and the long chain that connected them. Sakura tugged on them, making the links taut between her wrists. The action almost made Azumo shiver, but she might have just imagined it. She wanted to believe he could be afraid of her. So, when can we start making money over here? Will she be well enough in 2 days? Kotetsu asked, almost grinning at Sakura while he talked to the other man. Not for the gladiator boneyard. Why not? She cost too much to die in her first match. We'll wait the month for the official run in the Colosseum. They don't fight to the death there as long as that child is emperor. It's too sad a show to put your best fighters forward for. I don't know. Kotetsu turned to Sakura and addressed her for the first time. Have you ever killed a man before you became a slave? You can do it, but will you? That doesn't sound like much fun, but do I really have a choice? Sakura asked, feeling her stomach roll in the uneasy way that reminded her of what it felt like to look down into a pit. She had killed, yes, she had done so before in the dream world, but it never felt real until she started to think about it. Sai had been a true death, right? The faceless foes she had cut down, the monsters and beasts and wolves all were things she killed, and even some faceless dream appertains. You've become such a dirty thing. Remember when you didn't even take Orochimaru's life for killing Sasori? Now look at yourself. What a mess. Sakura wanted to shrink from the voice in her head. She felt bad for what she had done, but more than that, she felt bad for not feeling as bad about it as she should have. It barely fazed her when she thought about what she did with her hands. Killing was second nature to her by now. If she was ever going to be free of the dream curse, she would have to dye her hands with even more red between now and then. Let me fight someone, she said, looking up at the two boys while mentally pushing down the guilt and repulsion. I don't care, but I said I would, so let me keep my promise. It was Azumo who said something back. You're a slave, you don't need to keep promises, you do as you are told. Nah, don't be so hard on the girl. Why don't we try the boneyard in a few days? Work her up in time and teach her what she needs. She won't let us down if she fights like she just did. She's not a competent killer. 10 wasn't either until Ashura took her on, but look at her now. No one would have guessed such a scrawny little girl might grow up to be a weapons mistress. Azumo rolled his eyes, or at least only the one that was visible before shaking his head. Yeah, but don't forget how much that pissed Indra off, having to give her to his brother. Azumo stalked closer to Sakura, stopping a foot away. There's no way he will give this one up as well. No, she'll die first before he lets his pride take the fall, and there is nothing Ashura can do this time. Kotetsu hummed, looking over at Sakura as well. She hated how they were talking about her like she wasn't even there, but to them she was nothing more than livestock, a thing to be bought and traded. They could talk over her all they wanted, there was nothing she could do about it. Kotetsu at least looked at her and smiled. How about you feed her and let her bathe or something? She's been out here a while, and for her first exercise you shouldn't overdo it. Bring her out again in the morning. Ibiki will need her after this. There's no use getting her cleaned off. When he saw Sakura flinch, he frowned and averted his eyes, almost as if he cared that he was forcing her to do something she didn't want to do. Almost. But if there was regret or hesitation there in the man, it wasn't enough to keep her from taking her back to the man with scars all over his face after he had trained her long and hard out in the ring. Ibiki didn't look any happier to see her than she did, but he didn't waste any time before splitting her mind apart with his ability. Sakura screamed until the light was gone out of the world around her and the day was done. She fell back into the hay and thought that would be the end of it, but the dream didn't end this time either. When she looked up, Ibiki was still there, eating food from a plate before glaring at the way she watched him. A minute later he took his things and left her locked up, likely assuming she would fall asleep again, but there was no dream in the dream world. She couldn't wake up either. The curse was doing funny things to her again, lasting longer than it should. Sakura tried to force herself awake, afraid that she was sleeping longer than she should, but nothing worked. Her chakra was gone, and her senses were dull as could be. There was nothing she could do, and that was almost as bad as the way Ibiki tore into her mind only to find nothing. There were voices in the hallways around her stall, and Sakura stilled in her bed, pretending to be asleep as a light drew closer and the voices became louder. Someone stopped at her door and may have they peeked in, but one of the voices huffed in agitation and said, "Come on," before the light eventually faded. Sakura couldn't be sure, but she almost thought she heard laughter too, the quiet kind people like to hide behind their hands. She sat up after the light and voices both faded to stare through the cracks and watch the shadows move out across the opening to the field she had been using to practice in earlier that day. Sakura tried the door and found it locked. Ibiki was always vigilant about that when he left. The first two bolts she could never reach were always secured, and the third one she could reach was still in place. Even if she undid that one. Feeling stupid, Sakura slipped her fingers as far as they could go and caught the metal with her nail, pulling it up into the side. The whole door heaved as it swung open, the other bolts undone from whoever had held the light earlier. That's not suspicious at all, Sakura huffed, looking out at the light that was almost gone from her view. Was it really worth it to chase after a pair of people who could be anyone? It was a silly question, and she was already running out to meet them. Madness would eat her alive if she didn't move and do something. She only hoped that wasn't the whole point to the curse. If she knew it was a trap, would she have still left the stables? Of course she would have. She needed to keep moving forward. There was no way she gave up a life of luxury with Madara to stay stuck in a dusty hay bed. She could have been happy, but it wasn't right, so she forced herself to keep moving. The training pit was close and she slowed down, making herself quiet as she approached. It was still night and no one would be able to see her if she stayed still, but she could be plenty loud, so she made sure she did her best to go unseen. Approaching the edge, Sakura looked down and frowned when she saw a lantern in the dust, but no figure to hold it. There were footprints though, leading away from it in two directions. One pair was smaller than the other and she guessed they belonged to a woman. Sakura crept down and stopped at the edge of the glow, hesitating before heading off towards the man's footprints. The moment she stepped into the light, the air around her changed and she felt chakra in it. Sakura ed in a breath and dodged, moving before thinking. Someone's leg passed over her head and Sakura rolled into the body and leaving it before she could get caught in a grappling match. She was still in chains and didn't want that used against her. It was a girl, she was barely modest and the swell of her were clear as she righted herself. Loose brown hair fell back over her shoulders and Sakura blinked, recognizing the face. Tenten was an actor here and dressed like something from a 1980s Conan the Barbarian or He-Man comic. Tenten winked at Sakura before kicking up more dirt and Sakura jumped back, seeing metal on her boots. The two engaged and Sakura knew she was woefully inadequate to challenge the girl when she was set off in steel shackles. Sakura was doing a good job of holding her own, but she didn't see how she could close the distance when her opponent had an unending supply of slender needles to shoot from the safety of the lantern's glow. Tenten reached for something behind her and then Sakura saw the long steel face of a short-handed battle axe. Tenten grinned with mirth in her eyes, making them glow, before she lunged with a wild swing. Sakura swore, knowing she was useless without a weapon of her own, and what she had been told before was repeating again and again in her head. Depending on how much your sponsor or owner likes you, the matches will never be fair. Sometimes there are weapons, sometimes there are not. Sometimes a man goes in with nothing but a cloth for his dignity while his opponent glistens in armor. Is this what it would be like for her in the matches? This wasn't fair, this really wasn't fair considering how good Tenten was with the axe. She held it like a pro so that when she moved her blade was an extension of her body. It was like how Sakura had tried to be with the sword during the time Kisame taught her. But Sakura didn't have a sword and Kisame wasn't here anymore to tell he what she could do. If he was, what would he say? It was hopeless. Use what you have, kid. Tenten was too close and Sakura held up her chains, a taunt barrier to catch her swing. The blade came down fast and the links shattered under the impact. Sakura felt something in her snap and then she surged forward, faster than before. Tenten tried to right herself in time, but Sakura could touch her chakra and was using it to move her in flash steps to stand behind the other girl. Sakura's hand came down hard on the back of Tenten's head and the girl went down. There was recoil in Sakura's body and she shivered, backing up as the feeling of chakra was gone. The link between her shackles was severed, but the shackles were still on her wrist and those were the things that truly held her powers at bay. There was, however, now a crack in the barrier and Sakura could feel her chakra leaking through. It wasn't everything, but it was something. It was a fighting chance. Sakura circled Tenten and kicked the axe away, keeping her own fists up and ready to strike. That's just terrible. It wasn't even 5 minutes. Sakura flinched but didn't turn fully, only angled her body so she might keep Tenten in sight while she also saw the other figure come down into the light's ring. He looked too much like her own master to be anyone else. Are you the brother? Sakura asked, trying to remember the name Katetsu and Izumo had used. Oh my, you already know of me. I'm flattered, he laughed, looking like he didn't care that his slave was face down in the dirt with Sakura in striking zone, looking ready to kill. I am Ashura. We're happy to meet you. Sakura winced. Ah. Well, maybe Ten might not be so happy, but she will be once she wakes up. You did well. My brother has excellent taste. He was so lucky this time. I'm jealous all over again. What do you want? Sakura snapped, not feeling like she was in control of anything anymore. The high of having won against Tenten was fading fast. Oh, you're not dumb either. Does my brother truly not know what he picked up? Such a shame to keep you all to himself. He should learn to share a little bit more, Ashura said with a wide smile that seemed almost honest. He was dressed simply in a long white tunic, but the dark purple cloth around his arms was expensive enough to mark him as important. You're not going to answer my question. What is it you want? Sakura wanted her chakra back. Ashura's smile was so disarming. He looked at her and Sakura felt a little ashamed of keeping her fists up. He just kept smiling at her and it was the last thing she expected until Tenten started to stir. Sakura backtracked another handful of steps and created distance. I'm a KMPHer, she groaned. Ashura laughed while Sakura tensed. Don't become overeager, my dear. It's your own fault for underestimating her. You were even flirting, I saw you. Master. Ten cried, cheeks flushing. She glanced over at Sakura before climbing to her feet and collecting her weapons without another word. Ashura just kept watching Sakura, his smile still in place. Ah, I think I was going to answer your question from before. You wanted to know what it was I wanted, yes. When she nodded, he went on. I want you to fight for me, just like Ten did. You'll be my champion instead of my brother's. What are you doing asking me that? I'm a slave, remember? Sakura bit. She wanted to scream the words, she hated them so much. Ah, but you're also a creature of great power. You could just kill my brother if you wanted freedom. I would trust you to come back to me if you gave me your word. Kill? What? What are you talking about? He's your brother. Why would you ask me to kill him? Ashura laughed again and Sakura felt like she needed to sit down. Poor child doesn't know a thing. Everyone else knows we hate each other and this wouldn't be the first time one of us tried to kill the other, and God knows this won't be the last time if I am unlucky. Number. Her voice was a hissing adder in the air between them. It was the first time she saw his smile falter. He didn't look upset or angry, though. Ashura just watched her more closely, studying her even more. There is something you want. Those shackles off. I'll take them off and you'll be powerful again. You can kill him. I said no. You don't want those shackles off. He looked like he wanted to pity her. He'll never do that for you. If you don't take my offer now, you'll be in shackles for the rest of your life. You'll be in pain every day, you'll be beaten, hurt, and cursed for as long as you survive his pride. He won't protect you in the ring. Yeah, I guessed as much, but I don't like the idea of killing in such a way. Maybe one day I might, but I did say I wouldn't make trouble if they took my shackles off. I'm going to do the stupid thing and try to keep my word. I don't see him as my master, no one is my master, but I'll follow him for now. Where else would she find the obelisk than with his help? Indra doesn't know the value of what he has. So says you, brother. Sakura went stiff at the sound of the new voice. Ten was a pillar of stone from behind Ashura as the new body stepped into the light. Sakura held her breath as her slave owner took a stand behind her. Indra looked down at her and reached out to grab a fistful of her hair. He glanced sideways at his brother before bending down and kissing Sakura on the mouth. She felt her body go limp and burst into fire and freeze all at once. His other hand pulled at her hip, bringing her closer before he pulled away and let her stagger against his chest. You didn't have to be so dramatic about it, Ashura huffed. And what if that was something I've been wanting to do? Ashura looked put out as he looked off and pouted. It wasn't. Indra looked down at Sakura and then released her. She stumbled backwards a few steps before finding her balance again. Her eyes were wide as he watched her. At least now I know I can trust her not to kill me in my sleep for so petty a reason, but that's only the first step in graduating out of the shackles. You're welcome for that, Ashura huffed, beginning to turn away. Come on, Ten. brother wants a moment alone to tease his cute little slave. You'll have to wait for the morning to flirt with her again. Sakura didn't see them go, she was staring up at the dark-haired general in front of her. He was watching her, but she didn't recognize affection like she had before in other actors. His kiss had been something to throw her off, there was no emotion in it. This actor didn't like her like the others had. What is it you want, other than your shackles free? He asked her after a minute. Sakura rested with an answer in her head before saying anything. To win. Her answer seemed to surprise him. Both his brows rose and the weight of his body shifted from one leg to the other. Is that so? That is your honest desire, not even to survive, but to win. Why shouldn't it be? I've always had to fight in this stupid world and the ones before it. I'll always be fighting. Is there a weapon you favor? Sakura grinned, thinking of her bone-handle sword. Take off my cuffs and I'll show you. He glared at her and the look might as well have said, do you think I am stupid, or something like that? Gods know what you might summon, I will not. When she grimaced he didn't relent. You did well enough without a weapon. Back to the stables. I'll tell Ibiki not to bother with trying to know your mind. You will only focus on training your physical body. When she didn't say anything right away or move he leaned in, almost looming over her. Unless there is something else you would like to do, warm my bed. Sakura scowled, taking a step back. I'm a fighter, nothing more or less. Indra looked like he didn't care one way or the other as he turned from her and left the circle of light to walk back to wherever he had come from in the dark. He didn't call out to her and she didn't follow. When she got back to the stables she left the doors open and waited for the dream to end, but only morning came. Another day passed with her training in the pits, running, lifting, sparring. Day turned to evening and between Katetsu and Izumo she was nearly spent by the time she made it back to the stables. They told her tomorrow she would fight in her first match, but when she hit the hay the straw was cotton and her floor was a mattress and she was back in her room, waking up again after 2 days in the dream. Sakura watched Ami's plane take off through the glass and sagged a bit, until her forehead was pressed against the cold surface. This was for her good. This would be what she needed. Going off to Europe to study on her father's money from a world-renowned expert would be a dream to anyone, and so Sakura couldn't bring herself to feel resentment towards Amy for taking the offer. Still, Sakura watched the heavy bodies of metal sail through the air to grow small and smaller until winking out of sight. There was a new one every few minutes. Who else was in the air flying to a new dream? Another twinge of pain made Sakura grimace and she recognized the jealousy she tried to hold herself above. She adored Amy and wanted the best for her friend. Sakura didn't like the idea of being jealous of her friend for having such an amazing opportunity fall into her lap without any true effort. Amy was her friend. Sakura didn't want to be jealous of her friends. Sakura didn't want to be jealous at all. But she was. Sakura pulled herself away from the window and made her way out of the terminal back to the elevators that would take her to the pickup area. She had a few minutes before Ino would be there to pick her up, so she let her steps sag a bit, not caring that her pace was pitiful for such a busy airport. What time was it? Sakura checked her phone again and groaned, realizing it was later than it actually was. She thought she would have more time. From Ami's plane took off it would take Ino an hour to meet Sakura at the drop-off pickup area. Had Sakura really been standing in front of that stupid window for 45 minutes? It hadn't felt like more than 5. Sakura checked her phone again, thinking she might have misread it, and did the math, only to curse when she realized she now only had 5 minutes to get to the other end of the airport. She had spaced out again and wasted time. Breathing heavily, Sakura took the stairs down 2 at a time, trying not to look like she wanted to run the rest of the way like a madwoman because that's how she felt in her head. In her mind she was a slave in a dust pit tearing through the sand-colored clouds with nothing but shackles to hold her back. Sakura. Ino's call was obnoxiously loud, but she didn't seem embarrassed about it. Sakura sprinted the rest of the way and hopped into the blonde's passenger side door. Ino looked like she wanted to hug or something, but Sakura just waved her off. There are people behind us, let's go. If she was put out or slighted, Ino didn't let it slip in her expression. She pulled out easily and made herself a force to be reckoned with as she drove them out of the airport without mercy for all the other poor souls who wanted to merge into her lane. Ino drove the way she walked, with her chin high and her sights narrowed. I'm so glad you asked me this favor. I've been meaning to get together with you since I got back from Florida, Ino began after crossing the bridge onto lighter traffic. Is that so? Sakura hadn't known Ino had been in Florida, only that she had been away for a while. Ino was like that. Work took her away at the drop of a hat to all these different places for a night or a weekend, and then she was back like nothing ever happened. It would kill her, financially, for Sakura to go away with Amy and her rent being no longer in the picture. Yeah, Ino nodded as she merged without her blinker. I got another part-time gig working at the modeling office in the city, so I'll be around more often and working here, so it's sort of sustainable. I'm thinking of settling down for a year or two and wanted to know if you were interested. Interested? In what? Us? Ino answered in a chirp, her whole face looked like a smile. We can room together again. Wouldn't that be great? You could walk to the college and it would be just like what we talked about in high school. Sakura shut her eyes and turned her face away. I'm not going to college right now, Ino. Oh, yeah, I guess you're not, but you could if you were closer, so what about in the fall? No, I'm not. Sakura bit her lip and caught herself. Right now I need to focus on working and making money. I couldn't possibly make it work with what I have now. And my head's not in the right space for school. I don't know if that's even for me anymore. How are you going to be a doctor with an attitude like that? Ino laughed and Sakura wanted to choke. Ino meant to tease her friend, but all Sakura saw was sand for miles as a pair of shackles led her into an abyss of white. Sakura gripped the fabric of her seatbelt and twisted it in her hands, trying to recognize the feel of it, but her fingertips were numb. Her mind was hot and arid as Sakura struggled to form her own thoughts in a windstorm of sparkling grain. What is true? I'm in the car with Ino. I'm in the passenger's seat. The sun is out. There are no clouds in the sky. It is 72 degrees outside, according to her car dash. I'm wearing Converse sneakers. The air freshener is sand vanilla. Sakura coughed and bent over to hack out the breath she had skipped over. Ino made a noise of concern and Sakura fixated on it, feeling like she might fly away if she didn't. These damn roads, Ino hissed. I have water in the cup holder there. Ino pointed to a tumbler with lime and slices floating across the top. Sakura took a sip and placed it back before the blonde could say anything else. I just swallowed my breath wrong, Sakura lied, rolling her shoulders in an easy fashion. Her t-shirt was loose cotton that couldn't stay on both her shoulders at once, her left shoulder was the one left exposed now. But, yeah, it's fine if you don't want to go to the school or anything, but you could still work with me in the city and you wouldn't have to pay rent. Minimum wage jobs pay so much more in the city, you know. Plus, you're so smart, I know I could get you into the editing team somewhere. And I have a lot of room to myself, so you would be doing me a favor. I already have a job here. I would have to leave it behind without knowing if anything new would be better. It would be, I just know it would be. Sakura frowned, unable to see the upside to Ino's suggestion. It wouldn't be wise for Sakura to make any sudden moves, especially now with the dream world taking such a heavy toll on her. The kingdom of gods was nothing like the kingdom of monsters. The dreams lasted for days and she woke feeling older and more worn out than ever before. I'll think about it, Sakura finally said, knowing that telling Ino no would not be smart. Ino would just go on to try and make her offer seem better and better, but Sakura knew that Ino wasn't a miracle worker, and there was nothing Ino could do to make the nightmares and less real or her waking world any better. The shackles still chafed. It was getting harder to hide the marks on her wrist when she woke up. They healed a little bit, but they were still angry red rings and winter doesn't last forever. She could hide with long sleeves now, but in a few weeks it would start to warm up. Tax season was mad, of course, but Sakura could feel how close April was drawing, and soon there would be a break she could fall into. She was doubling up on so many days, mostly because it helped her avoid people and conversations she didn't want to have. People knew well enough to leave her alone when she was typing and working and quietly swearing to herself about how slow people were about getting the information she needed to complete a transaction. The second she pushed her chair away from her desk or step out for a break, someone would be there to ask if she was okay or if she had enough sleep. Even people she never talked to had begun asking her if she needed some extra coffee. Sakura got good at lying real fast. My friend just left and her goodbye party was last night. I've been house sitting for my friend out in the suburbs, but her dog doesn't like me enough to let me sleep anywhere but on the couch. These spring allergies are kicking my butt. I don't want to have to take another Claritin so soon. I haven't had my coffee yet. The machine broke at my house and I don't know how to fix anything more complex than a paperclip. A little bit of truth mixed into the lies made them fall easier from her lips. She said other things too, but only enough to keep people at a distance. She didn't want to talk to anyone, she wanted to never have to open her mouth again. People around her, adults, workers, employees on payroll with lives to pick up once they clocked out, none of them would understand anything about her, so it wasn't worth the wasted oxygen. Sakura glanced over at her phone when the screen lit up. It was Ino again. Another invitation. At least Ino didn't pry further than Sakura was comfortable with. Sakura knew how to get around Ino's questions, and she knew what Ino wanted. She wanted to feel forgiven, to feel justified, to feel like a good person again. She was naturally predisposed to bouts of self-righteousness, but her layers of pride fell away like wet paper alongside Sakura. Sakura wondered if Ino saw their friendship as anything more than a means to an end, with that end being Ino's loss of guilt. What happened to your wrist? Sakura froze, then looked up and let her breath ease out of her. It's old, Sakura commented, looking away from Genma. She didn't pretend to hide it or make anything out of it. He wouldn't press it. And if he did, Sakura didn't mind being harsh. It looks like a burn or something. What did you do? Curling iron. You curl your hair. Sakura glared, but didn't put much energy into it. Do you want a paycheck this week? Because I'm in your payroll right now and it would be so easy to not do my job. Genma huffed, pushing off from the wall and pulling out a filled banker box to sit on. I'm only saying what I think and everybody thinks. I don't give a rat's how many people think or ask what you think. Sakura went back to the keys and flew through the memorized processes faster than before. Did something happen with that guy you were seeing back in December? You were really happy and it was almost painful to watch, but now you look like death warmed over. It's really none of your business. I'm too rude to not make it my business and Yamamoto is being about it. Genma towed the empty box left by Sakura's desk before pushing it towards her. She kicked it away when it got close and he watched how her legs reacted. She felt like a cornered rabbit. He keeps agonizing over how he can't even talk to you about it cause he's afraid you'll be upset. I am upset, which is why I'm the one asking. Sakura paused, sparing him a second of thought before turning back to the screen and finishing up the payroll. She clicked out and began to shut down. When he heard the familiar sign-off sound, Genma stood, blocking her path. It was enough to make Sakura recoil and forget she wasn't in the dream anymore. Her body fell back into a crouch with hands up and ready to swing or swipe before she remembered where she was. Danger. She was in danger, but not because of the curse. Genma was staring at her hard now. Cursing, Sakura turned away and tried to play off her reaction. She picked up her bag and the empty Thirst Buster cup from the gas station that had been filled with sugar and ice only hours ago, now it dry. She couldn't remember the last time she ate anything good for her, but she drank enough liquids so she wasn't worried about dehydrating. Is he hitting you? Sakura picked up her keys from where she kept them in the dish by the door. Genma didn't move to her again, but his eyes followed her out, and tracked her when she didn't say anything in response. She made it to her car without a word. Sliding in, she saw him watching her from the open doorway, keeping her in his sights until she pulled out of the parking lot and onto the road leading away. Even on the drive home, there was no reason for sound, no reason for her voice, so she never uttered a word. When she got home, the house was as empty as her stomach, greeting her with silence and the occasional groan from the almost spring breeze. There was nowhere for her voice to go, so she kept it locked in her throat until night crept in. Sakura pulled out her phone and set her alarm before dressing for bed. The last few times she had dreamed, she had spent what seemed like days in the dream world, but when she woke up, it was still the next morning. She could go to sleep and dream for half a week, but when she woke up, the world told her she had only been in her bed for 7 hours, maybe less. What would that do to her long term? Would it mess with her aging? Would it get worse? What if she spent weeks and weeks inside the dream before waking? Would she forget what happened the day before in the waking world? How would she be able to function if it ever got worse? What if instead of weeks it was months, or years? Sakura set her alarm an extra hour earlier and laid down for the night, praying into her bed sheets with genuine honesty and fear for the first time in a long time. They worked her a bit in the morning, and then the two trainers took her to the pools where a pair of girl slaves in maid smocks washed her and dressed her for the night, braiding her hair in tiny coils as best they could with what little she gave them to work with. She smelled fine when she emerged from the pools, but she doubted that would last for long. The fights were beginning soon and she would have to sweat if she wanted to survive. They didn't reconnect the links between her shackles and she could feel the cracks in their binding where her chakra could seep through and give her the taste of power, but nothing else. It wasn't enough to use chakra for anything other than minor things. If she was careful, she might find some way to use it, but she couldn't think of anything. Oh. Sakura looked over her shoulder and saw the girl from the day before yesterday. Her name was only Ten here. But Sakura remembered Tenten from before and couldn't help but grin. It was better than all the new, mean and unfamiliar faces she found herself surrounded with. You did that on purpose, Tenten bit out, keeping her back to Sakura and refusing to turn around. Sakura looked down and remembered she had been in the process of pulling up her dress from where it bunched around her waist in folds. She was still wearing wrapping around her chest, but they were thin and tight and she wouldn't want to walk out looking so undressed. Hesitantly, Sakura pulled up the sides of her dress and slid her arms in before tying up the front. It was crude and looked like the leftover scraps of something else. Sorry about that. I didn't think someone would be walking by. Well, I was. Sakura frowned at her angry tone. Sorry. It won't happen again. If I had been someone else, you would have been in trouble. Sakura shrugged, reaching up behind her neck and rubbing a knot underneath the skin. It was nice to be able to reach behind her now that the links between her shackles were broken. It was almost as nice as the trickle of chakra she could pull at. I think I can handle myself just fine if I could take on you and live. When she looked back over her shoulder, she saw Tenten had turned around and was watching her with a look she couldn't decipher. It almost seemed like a cross between hurt and something else. I was going easy on you. He told me not to be lethal. Sakura didn't wait for Ten to say anything more on the subject. She turned around fully and closed the distance between them. So, am I fighting you at full strength today, or are you not even on the menu? Tenten almost sneered, but Sakura couldn't help but think she looked cute in her efforts to appear intimidating. Ten was young in this world, still a teenager. Regardless, she was younger than Sakura. When had Sakura become something older than a teenager? She still felt so young inside. I'm fighting someone else today. You'll be paired up with only one other fighter on the first day. They told me to tell you this much. It'll be 3 days worth of fights. They do that on purpose to drag it out and get the most out of the people's money. Sakura shrugged. Makes sense. Well, it'll be 3 or 4 days of fights. They say 3, but sometimes if it looks really impressive they save the championship fight for a 4th day. I'm fighting, but I'm on the other side of the chart, so we won't meet until later on, if at all. Do you know who I will be fighting? 10 scrunched up her nose. Another slave, a man, he's old and has a lot of scars, but no one cares to know his name. I don't think you'll have much trouble with how you were able to counter me. He might be starting you off easy on purpose, because you're new and he needs to build interest. Half the battle is won in the betting stands, you know. That's how things typically go. 10 nodded, glancing upwards at the young sun in the sky. It was climbing steadily. Soon it would be high enough to peer over the edge of the stands surrounding the gladiators' boneyard. Each patron had a tent or space reserved for them apart from the mock coliseum, but by the noise of it, most of them were already in their stands. Sakura's master and her brother were nowhere to be seen, so Sakura guessed that's where they were. Fine. Yeah, I'll come back after I win my match to see if there's anything else you need help with. I'm pretty early on the chart, 10 said. Shouldn't you be getting ready in the contestants' pen? Sakura asked, nodding to the tunnel that led down to the waiting areas for the fighters. Yeah, but you should come for that part too. Even if you're not fighting, you should watch the matches. Some of them know, it's just better to see for yourself how these guys fight. I don't know what kind of place you came from before, if people fought with honor or decency, but this isn't like that. You should see for yourself. I already know they'll play dirty. Yeah, but one of those winners will be your opponent, so it's better you see and know how he cheats. 10 started to turn but paused. She eyed Sakura wearily. You'll come, right? Sakura nodded. Yeah, right behind you. 10 spoke the truth when she said she would win her match, and Sakura knew why. The girl Sakura had bested that night in the pits was nowhere to be found in the boneyard. 10 was cruel and fast and little else. Her opponent had been young for most of the males, but that did him few favors as he still wasn't fast enough to track her movements or catch her swipes. They dragged the body off the field in time for the next match that hardly lasted any longer. Sakura saw a pattern of easily identified weakling against powerhouses in the next 4 matches. Even if it wasn't easy to see who was the favorite at first, as soon as they started moving, the difference became clear. Sometimes they do that to weed out the weaklings. The attendance is lower in the morning and picks up later in the day. The more closely ranked matches will happen later on, 10 explained from her seat in the stands beside Sakura. She was dusty, but no worse for wear. Sakura doubted the girl even sweat. So, which one am I? Sakura asked. The fodder or the favorite? You're a dark horse. No one knows for sure, which is almost as interesting as a close match. 10 grinned wickedly, her smile like a knife. If the people are lucky, today they'll get both. At the end of the bench Sakura caught sight of Kotetsu and Azumo, talking to each other in hushed tones and then looking at the pit. Azumo looked up at her and glared with his one good eye while his friend smiled sheepishly. Sakura turned her eyes back down to the match and pretended she didn't want to know what they were talking about. Something told her she was a part of their conversation, or at least her fate. Sakura's attention snapped from its mindless drift when she heard 10 gasp and lean forward in her seat. Another dark horse, she hissed. Sakura looked down to the arena and felt her heart stop at the clear face of the newest contender. A Gaul, or an old tribal Goth from the Germanic region, he stood with heavy shoulders and an older face than the one Sakura was used to. Kiba still had the same red tribal markings on his face, but his eyes were so much harder and his jaw that much sharper. He was older, yes, but there was something more that made him a different person than the one she knew from the Monarch Woods. Who is he? Sakura asked, hating how weak her voice sounded out loud. Her heart felt pain again for the boy with bright smiles who trailed after her with a puppy's love. She had left him to a heart sickness, but no one's attraction had won her over in the obelisk. She wouldn't feel guilty for it. He's one of those wild ones from the north. Someone said he can use chakra. Look at his hands. Sakura did, and that's when she saw the gauntlets that looked just like hers. They were new looking too, newer than hers at least. Who do you think will win? Marius is one of the favorites. He used to be a Roman legionnaire. Kiba will win, Sakura breaths, not caring that she's not supposed to know this boy's name. The match begins and it is one of the bloodiest ones yet. Kiba didn't just win, he dominated. The other fighter's body was a mess of gore and blood and broken bones. The Gaul stood over his kill with blood dripping from his muzzle, thrilled to some degree by the savage cheer rising up from the crowd. They loved it and wanted more of this new vicious killer. All Sakura's heart could do was break for the boy with lost smiles. "You're next," Azumo said, tapping her shoulder roughly. His voice was sharp as he nodded down to where the waiting pits were. Another pair of fighters were already stalking out to fight, but Sakura needed to be ready once one of them went down. "That last match was pretty messy, don't you think?" Kotetsu asked, voice light and dismissive as he watched through the gaps of wood that separated Sakura and her team from the pits. "But I think you'll be fine if you have to go up against him. He's feral, not very bright." Sakura nods, understanding his words. She saw the same fight. She knows what he means. Kiba was all animal out there in the dust and blood. It was hard to see him and think he was human and not wolf. "You won't have to fight him till the semi-finals if you both make it that far," Azumo huffs, crossing his arms over his chest. "Not that you should be worried about that right now. You're going to be going out there soon enough. This one looks like a quickie, they're not evenly matched at all." "It's the mystery bunch," Kotetsu laughs. "No one knows how the next few fighters will do. All win." Both men turn to look at her. She raises her eyes to meet theirs, already hearing the cheer from the crowd of another kill. Blood was in the air and on the earth, but none of that mattered. "I will win," she said again, more slowly and deliberately, as if that made it more true. Kotetsu reacted first, smiling and nodding. "Of course you will. That's what we believe." Sakura doesn't wait for Azumo to say anything. He might not say anything, so she doesn't hold her breath, she just pushes the wood back and walks into the arena, feeling the full force of the stench. It's not just blood, but urine and vomit and sweat from fear. It's a mix of hell to her senses, but she remembers Kisame and it's enough for her to keep her face set. She has not come so far to fall now. "First thing we work on is your stance. I don't care if you're punching or swinging a sword, how you stand and how you breath all are vital to every fighter." It's almost as if Kisame was there in her ear, reminding her of their lessons. Even before the nightmares in Obelisk began, Sakura had a body in the real world that remembered fighting, that remembered kids' karate and older self-defense classes. She wasn't a stranger to fighting, but in the last 2 years, she grew that much closer to it. Fighting was a part of her soul now. So when the aged fighter with more scars than skin walked out, it didn't make a difference to Sakura. She had no limit to her endurance, so she paid to eye, running and dodging and never stopping for as long as she was in the ring. He was old, which meant he was slower but tougher. She aimed for his kidneys and she knew she did damage, but he was either really numb to the pain, or he was tougher of skin than she thought. Maybe both. He swung at her, and it was the first she realized he had a weapon when she didn't. The odds were not for her, but she wasn't the dreamer for nothing. She rushed for his wrist and her teeth caught him and bit down. He tasted terrible, but he dropped the crude knife and it became hers. When she reached for it, his knee found her ribs and she was sent rolling through the dust with the prize in her hand, feeling cracked in 2 different places. Still, when she stood, she could see the fear in his stance. He had realized it. He was the weaker one. "Don't look at his face," she told herself as she closed the distance. He didn't have time to evade. She didn't let him. Sakura buried the blade between his eyes and stumbled backwards while the body pitched like a debased tree in the forest. For a moment she saw too clearly what she had done, and then the body tipped and fell to one side while the world burst into applause. She tasted bile in her throat, and she swallowed it down. "Look at what you've done," a voice that wasn't Kisame's hissed in her ear. Sakura clenched her jaw and refused to move her face in the direction of the body. It wasn't real, he wasn't real, This was no different than a video game kill. Good job. Now get off the field, Azumo called to her from somewhere over her shoulder. Sakura looked up to see him glaring at her while Kotetsu cheered. She headed in their direction without looking up into the stands to see shouting for her or the brothers Ashura and Indra watching her with interest. She hadn't even remembered to look for their box where they both sat together. She had seen them once when walking in with Ten, but not again since then. You'll fight again tomorrow for sure, Kotetsu laughed before slapping her on the back. Something came away with his hand and he made a screwed up face that almost looked like horror. Sakura knew she smelled bad, but didn't want to know what she rolled through or landed in. I want to go see one of the other fighters, is that allowed? Sakura asked, watching both of them. Ten, Kotetsu asked. Sakura shook her head. The feral Gaul. Will I be fighting him tomorrow since we both won? Azumo shook his head, point out behind her where a new pair of fighters emerged. Likely no, since the winner of the next match will be your opponent, and then after that the semi-final matches are drawn randomly by a priest from Ares Temple. So I can see him. It's not a good idea, but there is no rule against it. Just don't try to kill him before the match, it will get you kicked out and then one of us will have to kill you on account of the money we would lose, said Azumo. Sakura nodded and then slipped behind them, trotting down through the tunnels connecting each waiting area. There were a few with bodies still in them, but most were empty. The winners had likely all gone out to the stands, but Sakura knew that Kiba wouldn't the same way she knew he wouldn't be the same boy she left behind so many months ago. Months, years, how long had it been since the Monarch Woods? She saw him in his shackles, a chain connecting them to the wall as he crouched down on the stone floor. He looked up when he heard her approach and she saw through the slats in the wooden door, how he moved to smell her approach. There was a latch on the door but it wasn't locked. Without his chakra his chains would be enough. Kiba, she breathed, watching him stiffen at the sound. She undid the latch and pushed the door open. Kiba, what happened to you? The scars on his arms stood out and she felt it reverberate in her heart, the guilt she didn't want. She ached with him. It was terrible that he had to live this fate again and again with each new dreamer. She hated the idea that he was in agony because of her. Her role in the dream condemned him to this. Her hands tingled and she wished she had enough chakra in them to smash down walls. It wasn't enough, but maybe there was some way she could break his own bonds. If he would do the same to her, she could get free and together. She stepped forward to reach out to him, but he lunged for her, more beast than man as his throat opened in a deep bark. Back, he snarled. Away from me, woman, or I'll kill you here before the there. His eyes were wide and narrow all at once, seemingly impossible. The red marks on his face stood out vibrantly. He snarled again and his chains strained. I'll kill you, kill you. Kiba, stop it, I don't mean you harm. I'm not here to hurt you. My name's Sakura, I'll kill you. He lunged again and again, straining and jerking on the chain. He was a wild thing that spoke the truth, and that broke a part of her heart. Sakura took a step back, holding the side where her ribs were likely cracked. She was in pain, but Kiba was supposed to be her friend here. He was supposed to not blame her for any of this, but instead help her and aid her as the dreamer. She was special to him. She was supposed to be special to him. Sakura opened her mouth but no words came out. She let her lips still as she slowly backed away. On the threshold of the door she reached for it, prepared to leave him on the other side of it once she eased it shut. I'm sorry you became like this, Kiba. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. It's your fault. Your fault. Dreamer is the fault. You're the fault is yours. Sakura stumbled backwards and hit the solid chest of a person. He caught her shoulders and turned her, crossing her legs as she pivoted. She stared up into the narrowed red eyes of Indra, lined in red war paint. He was just as intimidating as ever. You know the boy. He looked up over her head at the body of the screaming man inside. Kiba wasn't a boy anymore, but maybe that's how he seemed to someone who hadn't been there when he had baby fat in his face and a smile too wide to hold. I wasn't going to. Number. I was mistaken. Of course, he hummed disbelievingly. But he's been a slave in the army for nearly a year now. They couldn't hope to control him anymore, so now he is here. Did you think he knew him before all that? I was mistaken, it's the wrong boy. He still held her around the shoulders and he didn't seem prepared to let her go. He looked over her shoulder, searching through the gaps in the wood door for something he couldn't find. You knew someone like that. Maybe not him, but that tone was one I easily recognize. You think to find a friendly face down here in the pits. His eyes fixed back on her and his hands hurt her shoulders. Iwan, you don't need to come here to scare me like this. I didn't do anything wrong. You're my slave, I can treat you as I like. I'm not a thing you can own. Sakura snarled, remembering what it was like to feel anger. It was too easy to start to give in to the words of others, she needed to keep herself safe with truth. She wasn't a thing, she wasn't a slave, she was a person with an identity and she was free. He almost growled, reaching behind her to drag her forward, but she hissed in pain at the way he made her move her ribs. One was broken for sure, the other might just be bruised. He flinched at the sound of her intake of breath and dropped his hand to a loose hold. Indra looked over her, searching for a wound, and in that moment his hold was slack enough for her to pull away. She held her ribs, backing away, out of his new reach. He watches her in a way she recognizes and knows too well. She needs to get away. She needs to flee from this man, from this moment, from this situation before it develops any further. Maybe there is softness there under his words, but in some way he's a monster and she needs to flee before he makes her an exception. Don't move, he orders her, stern but not cold. Sakura swallows, conflicted on what she must do as he approaches her. Her back hits an wall and the choice is made for her. She can go no further. He reaches for the end of her shirt and lifts it up. A pale hand with fingers made for piano keys runs over her ribs, tracing the blooming discoloration. Sakura hisses again and he pauses. There is heat there and then a cool replaces it, soothing the inflamed skin. Sakura exhales and looks down to see his hand glowing over her wound. It's such a crude attempt, it does little to set the bone, but the pain is dulled a bit more now. He's not a healer, he doesn't know the ways of healing like Tsunade or Shizune, but he knew chakra. What are you? He's not a slave like her, not an outsider like her, so why? He catches her eye and Sakura doesn't flinch, not even when his face draws impossibly close to hers. She breathes and the air tastes like his breath before he kisses her again, bending her to him. She's floating in the world as a messy haze of rose and crystals. It's calm enough to melt into. Sakura remembers herself a moment later and pushes back, hitting the stone wall and sliding down. Indra watches her, making no move to follow her. Wordlessly, he turns and leaves her. That night Ibiki comes to ask her about the boy she called Kiba, and why she wanted to see him so badly. She doesn't tell him and he strikes her across the face, into the hay of her bed. And in the never-ending night of her dream, she's almost afraid, but he leaves her after that and doesn't come back. In the morning the mark on her face could have been from anything. No one asks, so she doesn't mention it. It's not like she actually slept or anything like that. Last night she lay awake, waiting for the dream to end and release her to the waking world, but none of that happened. She was beginning to lose track of how long she had been dreaming. Was this the second or the third day? It gets harder to tell after the whole of the day rushes over her in a blur. She doesn't face Kiba or Ten, the only other actors in the lineup, but a younger, fitter version of yesterday's outlaw. Sakura remembers the fight, or at least most of it. She remembered the part where she stole his sickle and severed his hand from his wrist in a familiar fashion. Like the way she danced in the kingdom of man to Orochimaru's deadly jitterbug, Sakura made herself a collector of souls on the boneyard's floor. There were actually 2 fights for her in one day, and it was late when the last one fell, a imposing Viking-like woman with long blonde braids and one glass eye. She had been harder than the other, and the only one who didn't underestimate Sakura's abilities, but Sakura had lived almost 2 years in the dream world where death was her shadow. At the end of the day she was blooding, but she was alive and victorious. 4 contestants remained standing, 3 of those 4 were important to the dream. Sakura, 10, Kiba, and a brute that had shown no hesitation or seemed to have no difficulty in any of his fights. Tomorrow, he's ours. Sakura turned to the side to see 10 looking out across the yard. Around them the circle of spectators cheered. They had been walked out and put on display in preparation for the next day's main event. Ours, Sakura echoed. It's a free-for-all. A 4-way fight can only be for our favor. You and I can worry about who comes out on top tomorrow after laying out the competition. Sakura looks back over across the way to where Kiba stalks back and forth on a short chain, feral like always. He's only let loose to maul and little else. She hadn't tried talking to him again after the last time, but more than once she had rehearsed conversations in her head. She never got far in them. Who are you more afraid of? Sakura asks, looking away from Kiba to stare back over her shoulder at the younger girl. 10 shifts her shoulders up and then down, not quite a shrug. I'm fast, but so are you. Our skill sets are too similar for it to make a difference. But isn't there a different reason for you to ask that? Sakura doesn't answer and 10 almost looks exasperated. I'm not going to tell. Don't look at me like I'm a snitch. There's nothing to tell. And you got that on your face from one of the fights, right? Ha, no, I watched you well enough to recognize a backhand when I see one. Ibiki came to see you the other night when he heard about how you reacted to the boy. I wouldn't be surprised if Indra set him upon you. Sakura tried to mask her features and school her face into something dismissive. And what would you know about Indra? I thought it was Ashura who owned you. Yeah, but they're brothers in more ways than just blood. I've been here long enough to know Ashura so well I can see parts of him in Indra. But between the two of them, I got the better end of the stick, I think. Sakura refuses to touch the discoloration on her face, hoping it dulls by the time she wakes up in the morning, whenever the morning comes. There is nothing to tell. Not in this life at least. 100 years ago in a world filled with snows there were stories there worth telling, but I've died and been reborn 4 times since then. Sakura shakes her head and the short strands of her hair slap the sides of her face. They're getting longer and she plans to cut them again. Since I know they told you to ask me about it, that's what you can tell them. 10 stiffens, and her face flushes. Sakura guesses she is not used to being sneaky or civil. She is all steel and fight. Words are not her weapons. To the side one of the gates opens up and a number of patrons and spectators dressed in finery walk out onto the field. In front of them a child sweeps away the worst of the bloody sand to make it neater for their trek. Sakura's eyes narrow when she sees Indra walking alongside his brother Ashura behind a pair of faceless patrons. One of the unnamed patrons went to Kiba, and the other went to the last champion. A 5th and 6th circled the whole of the group, likely debating on where their bets would go. Ashura stopped in front of 10 and smiled wide, humming knowingly when he saw her blush. Ah, did your girlfriend say something mean to you? He asked on a childish laugh that only made 10 sputter more. Sakura's gaze was snatched away when she felt Indra's hand under her jaw. He's staring at her, but she can't tell where his eyes land. He's staring at all of her, taking in as much as he can. Sakura lets her lids drift almost closed as she slides her eyes to the side, obviously disinterested with his proximity. You would be wise to not look away from me, he almost growls. No one ever accused me of being wise, she says. At her sides her arms hang lifeless, restless, itching to be allowed to do something dangerous. Are you ready for tomorrow? He asks, stepping back and letting his hand fall from her chin. Sure, fine, Sakura mutters with a roll of her shoulders. He's never asked this of her before. Why wouldn't I be? The boy. Sakura still herself before she can flinch. She will not react. She will not show emotion. She does her best to appear ignorant. You want something from him. You're allowed to kill him tomorrow in the matches. See that you do. Her fingers tense, itching to turn unto themselves and curl into a fist made for shattering the earth. But she's still in shackles, so she grins as sweetly as she dares and laughs. Indra's eyes flash at the sound. Oi, don't be so mean to your pretty new pet. She'll never smile at you if all you do is threaten her and tell her to kill her boyfriend, Ashura teases, sliding up alongside his brother with anything but brotherly affection in his smile. No, Sakura knows enough to see past the mask Ashura has in place for the audience around them. It may sound teasing, but Ashura wants to wound his brother. Ashura wants to make Indra react. Deal with your own bed mates, Indra growls, red eyes flashing. Ashura pretends to think about it before chuckling and shaking his head, the way a parent would with a child that has just said something ridiculous. Oh, silly brother, don't be jealous for what's not there. I don't take pets into my bed. You should know better. The sweetness seeps out of Ashura's voice, and when he looks up, his eyes are as hard and cold as his tone. After all, those things bring cockroaches into the sheets with them. Sakura's almost thrown as his insult cuts sharply across Ten's features. She goes white, then when she sees Sakura looking over at her, the brunette reddens and looks away, as if ashamed. It's enough to make Sakura stiffen, her eyes darkening. And here Ten said she got luckier with her master. Sakura prefers assholes who are upfront and honest about being assholes. The worst kinds of assholes are the assholes that pretend to be nice and don't think they're assholes at all. It's a shame to hear the young lord cannot even attract cockroaches into his bed on his own, Sakura mutters under her breath with familiar sass. It's enough to make Indra whip his eyes back to Sakura in an instant while his brother goes stiff, more shocked than insulted. When neither says anything, Sakura lifts her head a bit and schools her features into a look that was too well worn from her teenage years, the years she had nothing to lose and sass to spare. Indra swallows while Ashura tries to fake another smile. How amusing, brother, you taught her tricks. Now see if she will listen to some of your commands now. Ashura's tone is cheerful, but his smile is forced while his eyes are sharp as flint. I think she's done just fine, Indra replies, faking nonchalance. He turns back to Sakura and touches the side of her face again, the side that was blossoming in bruise. He frowns. I'll have someone see to this right away. In the morning, first thing they entertain with the actors. Once that is done, you will fight for me and you will win. Sakura slides her eyes to the hulk of a man she intended to go after as soon as the match started. He was the only one unimportant to the story. He wouldn't be easy, but Sakura knew he was the least important by far. Yeah, well, it wasn't my plan to lose, and I kind of don't want to die. Indra produces something from inside his robe, and from off the side, his brother Ashura watches. What is that? Sakura asks, looking down at the obsidian shard. It reminds her of the black obelisk she knows she needs to find. This is a shard of the crown you are to win tomorrow. Do not fail me, and the obelisk wreath is yours. It's all Sakura can do to make it back to the barn in one piece before the dream finally ends.